Welcome to Late Night Story. When the world goes silent and shadows stretch longer, some stories awaken, whispered only to those still awake. So put on your headphones, turn down the lights, and let me guide you through the quiet hours. If you're listening alone, you're exactly where you need to be. If everyone can leave a comment to let me know where you are listening from in the world, don't forget to subscribe before you drift too far into the dark.
Story 1. I'm a ride operator for a theme park. There's one roller coaster. We are not allowed to operate. I've always been obsessed with roller coasters. There's just something about the way they defy gravity, defy death, rush you to the very brink, teetering at the edge where anything can go wrong, yet somehow everyone returns safe and sound at the end. At least most of the time, right? There are some roller coasters that have been famously dangerous, like the Jetline in Sweden, a popular coaster that ran for decades, but after replacement parts weren't properly tested, one of the coaster's trains derailed fatally. Or at Six Flags, where a restraint on the Texas Giant coaster came undone and a woman was flung from the ride to her death. In my town, there's a small Six Flags style theme park. I won't tell you the name, but you've probably heard of it in the news recently. In any case, it's mostly rides and carnival games. I've been an operator there for the past few months. But there's one roller coaster that no passengers are allowed to ride. It's funny because I see them test running it all the time. One day, I even went and asked a fellow staff member, Markesha, when they were going to open the new coaster. She said never, and I couldn't tell if she was serious or joking. I asked her again. She said with a shrug, "Boss says the Ultimate has got some sort of bug." Anyway, fast forward a couple months and Markesha and I are kind of casually dating. She's nerdy, snarky, and a few years older than I am. We're pretty different, but maybe that's why we get along. One thing that unites us is our passion for roller coasters. The Ultimate still isn't open, and one afternoon she suggests that maybe we ride it ourselves after the park closes. "Wait, for real?" I exclaimed. "Yeah, I mean last time everything got safety checked, it passed all the checks. Plus I saw someone on it yesterday when it was running. There's literally nothing wrong with it. I think it's just superstition. The boss won't open it to public. He's convinced it'll go wrong, like the first time," he says. The idea of there being some flaw in the Ultimate's design that could be dangerous gave me pause. But Markesha was at least as well versed as I was in all the ways theme park rides can kill you. Anytime there was news of another theme park death, we talk about whether it fit into our top 10. Mechanical failures, obviously, are big on our list, and design failures, like the water slide that decapitated a 10-year-old boy. Then there are human errors. We often argue whether to count fatalities from visitors trespassing in fenced-off areas and then getting whacked by mechanical parts. I don't really count these since, well, it's kind of like when people play on train tracks. Not to be mean about it, but in those situations you can't really blame the rides. Anyway, the Ultimate didn't have any mechanical issues or design flaws, so in theory it should be safe. Like Markesh had said, it had recently been tested for any engineering problems and passed with flying colors. It ran smoother than our flagship roller coaster, the Cobra. Neither Markesh nor I had pre-existing health issues, and the design of the Ultimate was nothing extraordinary. It had only one giant loop and, further on, a smaller one. Despite the name, it was actually less intense than the Cobra, our most popular coaster. Probably the coolest thing about it was its design, a jet black roller coaster with sinuous curves like a serpent. So anyway, Markesh and a friend of hers, Carlos, and I all agreed to meet after the park closed and try out the Ultimate. Staff were still cleaning up around the park, but it was deserted of visitors when I went to meet Carlos at the main entrance. I remember Carlos and I walking toward those ominous black loops of the Ultimate and seeing the coaster running as Markesha put it through one more test run. Either another employee or a test dummy was in it as it shot by. It was very fast. Not fastest in the world, but damned if it wasn't fastest in the park. "Dude, that thing is awesome," exclaimed Carlos. When we got to the ride's entrance, Marquesha told me everything checked out fine, and that she and Carlos would go first. I started to object, but she said, "Nah, I get first dibs. I'll run it for you again after." "Woohoo, let's do this," said Carlos. Like all modern roller coasters, pretty much everything was automated after pushing the button for it to go. The main part of my job was a safety check beforehand, making sure everyone was strapped in, nothing loose, no belongings to go flying off and hurt someone, etc. I sighed and performed the requisite safety checks on Marquesha and Carlos, tugging their harnesses to make sure they were strapped in. The rest of the train was, of course, empty. Come on, let's go," hooted Marquesha. "Let's do this," shouted Carlos. I pressed a button and sent them on their way. The coaster began, its 2 passengers shouting and waving, and slowly ascended the incline to the park's most precipitous drop. I watched, trying not to feel envy. Oh, I get my turn, but I burned with the desire to go first. I watched as that sleek black train climbed to the very top, hung for a moment at the peak, and dropped like a bullet. Screams from my 2 friends as they plunged, their hands up, waving, laughter on their faces as they flashed by, and then they were looping. I lost sight of them for a moment from the operator area. So I came out from under the roof and looked up. They were heading toward the second loop, but oddly there was another passenger somewhere at the back of the train car, but I could have swore it was empty when they boarded the ride. As they spiraled into the second loop, I waited for renewed screams and laughter, but the roller coaster looped silently, winding on this hypnotic track, and then taking a big slow circle around back to the start. Not a sound from it. The click-clack of the train's arrival, and then the hiss of brakes. At the front I could see Marquesha and Carlos slumped in their seats. No one else in the train with them, and no movement from either of them. I did not immediately go to unbuckle them. I was too much in shock, because why weren't they moving? Were they both unconscious? Had they hit their heads, been jostled too hard? But the ride looked so smooth. Suddenly another infamous roller coaster came to mind, one that had been designed but never constructed. Marquesha and I used a debate about whether it would be fantastic or terrifying to ride, the euthanasia coaster. The idea is that 24 riders board and pass through 7 loops, and when the ride comes to stop, they are all dead. The roller coaster's loops become tighter and tighter. The G-forces induce and prolong cerebral hypoxia, insufficient oxygen to the brain. If you were a rider on it, you'd pass out and be dead before coming to the ride's end. To me, the concept is horrible. Marquesha always said it would be a terrific way to die. I still didn't have the courage to approach her or Carlos. There was another staff member walking by outside the ride, pushing a drinks cart. I screamed for help. She came up and went to the roller coaster and swore, and then got on the phone. Emergency services arrived and unstrapped Marquesha and Carlos. The next day, the park opened as normal. The incident didn't even make the news until much later, since there were no traumatized crowds or blood or cleanup. Just the 2 bodies unstrapped and quietly carried away, and a roller coaster that remained out of commission, as it had always been. I'm haunted by the fact mine was the hand that pushed the button, but the ultimate was examined, and all test runs with dummies proved safe. There's no explanation. The ride remains closed due to the bug that Marquesha mentioned me back before she decided we should try to ride it. The bug has become kind of an urban myth among the staff there. They test the coaster again every once in a while, running it without anybody on it. They never put anybody on it. But I learned later that the bug isn't a design flaw, pressy. What the boss calls a bug is actually a passenger, a rider that can always be seen in one of the seats near the back, even when the coaster runs with no one in it. A passenger who always appears after the first loop. At least, it used to be a single passenger. Now there are 3. Story 2. Please take my advice. Do not ever go solo camping in the woods. I had always wanted to take a solo camping trip. I watched countless hours of people doing them on YouTube, and after I'd saved up some money, I decided to buy all the gear I needed and headed to the nearby national forest. It was a 5-hour drive to get there, so I set off just after dawn. I listened to a few podcasts and sang my heart out for the rest of the way. The time flew by, especially as I got closer to arriving. The views were breathtaking. The mountains rose in the ground, towering over me. It was almost a frightening sight, but the clear water and falling autumn leaves washed any fear away. I arrived at the parking area just after midday. It was pretty empty, mainly due to it being the middle of the week in October. There were 2 or 3 cars, but it seemed like I would be unlikely to run into anybody, which was fine by me. I'm not really one for people. I like to keep myself to myself, and I would prefer going for a walk surrounded by nature rather than be surrounded by obnoxious, drunk people at a bar. I grabbed my backpack, which had pretty much everything I needed in it, and I started my hike into the forest. It was so peaceful. There was no sound of cars and machines, just birds chirping and the wind blowing through the leaves of the trees. The leaves danced to the beat of a non-existent drum, and I found myself just standing there, transfixed by them. Something flew straight past my head. Startling me, my heart began to race. I looked up to see a small, elegant swallow perched on a branch. I chuckled to myself and continued on with my hike. After about an hour, I came to a clearing. A vast lake with crystal clear water stood in front of me. I looked out, taking in the majestic scenery. Something made me stop looking. Out of the corner of my eye, I thought I had seen someone standing in the tree line about 50 yards back. Sharply turning around, I scanned the trees and couldn't see anything. It was probably another bird, I thought to myself. I hiked on for another few miles and found a small clearing. Huge trees towered over. Pretty orange and yellow leaves lay on the ground. It was as good a place as any, I thought. I grabbed a tent out of my large backpack and got to work setting it up. It was starting to get late by the time I had finished. I decided to make a fire and heat up some tomato soup that I had brought with me. Making the fire was easy. I had been camping with my father many times when I was younger. He would have loved this, the peaceful tranquility, surrounded by nature. He once said to me, "Jack, I feel at home in nature, and one day so will you. It's in our blood." He was right. I had never felt more at home than I did sitting there with the fire lit, the sounds of occasional birds, and the still calmness of the woods. I rustled to my bag and found my phone near the bottom. There was barely any signal out here, but just enough that I had received a message from my sister asking if I had made it safely. I texted her back and set the phone down beside me. It was a little after 10 o'clock, so I decided to turn in for the night. I had another big day of hiking tomorrow. I got into the tent and zipped it up. It was only small, just enough room for one person, but that was all I needed. I had my sleeping bag, a book to read, and a flashlight attached to the top of the tent. I read my book for a while and fell asleep with the book still in hand. I woke up abruptly. I didn't know what it was, but I had a bad feeling in my stomach, and shivers burrowed their way through my body. I reached next to me for my phone, but realized I had left outside when I put it down earlier. I was about to get up and go out to find my phone when I saw a light coming from just inside the tent by the zip. I realized it was my phone. Maybe I had picked it up and it had slipped out of my pocket, I thought, trying to reassure myself. A minute later, the phone chimed. A new message appeared on the screen. It was from an unknown number. My hands began to tremble. I shakily unlocked my phone and opened the message. "I can see you. Why don't you come out and play?" My heart was thumping in my head. I was panicking. I didn't have any weapons with me. The best I could do was hit them with a flashlight, but that was not going to do much damage. I just sat there, not moving a muscle, trying to listen out for whether the person was nearby. Then a new wave of fear washed over me. He must have been in the tent. He picked up the phone and unzipped it. He had to be nearby, or he was before at least. I dialed 911 and told them my situation, making sure to whisper. They said they would dispatch someone immediately, but I knew it would take them hours to get here. The nearest police station was at least 2 hours away, and they would have to walk the rest of the way once they got here. After the call, another text came through from the same unknown number. "Don't be scared. The police won't find you, but I can help." I was whispering to the police. They must have been near the tent. I decided I had only one choice: try and outrun them. I am a pretty fit guy. I go to the gym and hike regularly, so I gave myself a good shot, but the fact of the matter was I had no idea who this person was. They could have a knife or, worse, a gun. But what choice did I have? I had no way of defending myself. I waited a while, trying to build up the courage. The person outside had gone quiet for now, but I knew they were still out there somewhere. I decided I would take my flashlight with me and could either use it as a weapon or maybe try and blind them with the light. I quickly unzipped the tent. I burst out of it and started running. I heard a yell from behind me, a deep, unsettling voice. As I was sprinting away, I turned and looked. The man was chasing me. He looked like he stood much taller than me and wider. He looked more like a bodybuilder, from what I could see. I thought I had the edge on him due to being smaller, but he was surprisingly quick. I checked back again, and this time I could see a metal bat in his hand. He was gaining on me. My legs burned and were screaming at me in pain to stop. I ran and ran for as long as I could, just keeping away from him. It must have been a few miles before I saw the flashing blue and white lights of the police cruiser. I looked back, and the man chasing me had stopped. I couldn't see him anymore. I ran over the police officers and pretty much collapsed on the floor. I told them what had happened, and they radioed for more units. They put me in the back of the police cruiser and waited for backup. After what seemed like an eternity, 2 other cruisers pulled up and I was taken back to the station. I had already given my statement while waiting, but they just wanted to confirm a few details back at the station. That was a few days ago. I was so relieved to get back and relax. I have never been so scared in my life. I think my heart only just stopped racing. They haven't found the guy yet. They searched the whole forest with no luck. I am back at home now, but I just realized he had my phone outside the tent. He could know where I live. It's nighttime now. I just called the police, but I heard a thud downstairs. I live alone. Story 3. I'm a trucker on a highway that doesn't exist. There are rules for surviving the road. Series. Don't be alarmed if the road feels a few minutes longer every time you drive it. That's because it is. As the road lengthens, new side streets may appear. DDO not take these, however alluring. Gas stations may pop up to fill in stretches of empty desert. Be wary of purchasing snack brands you have never heard of or that do not exist. Cacti will show up every few miles that weren't there on your last drive. These are just cacti. No need to fear the cacti. If your drive on Route 333 takes more than 30 minutes than the last time, report such fluctuations immediately. Multiple former employees who fail to report such anomalies are still stuck there, still driving. Employee Handbook, Section 7.c. Underscore 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 underscore. It was about the time I graduated from undergrad and finally braved checking on the empty void that was my bank account that I realized 3 things. 1. Perhaps an English degree hadn't been the smartest choice for replenishing the aforementioned empty void that was my bank account. 2. 3. I could no longer live in student housing. 4. 5. I had utterly no idea what to do with my life. 6. All of those, along with a healthy mix of typical Gen Z stress / depression / insert anxiety disorder here, were probably the reasons I responded to the advert in my mailbox for trucking positions along the Pacific coast. I didn't actually expect anything to come of my application, but the company responded immediately and offered to pay for a trip to go out and talk with them. I'd never been to California, so why not? Besides your typical interview questions, the only other thing they had me do was a skill assessment. All you have to do is take a freight truck to the turnaround point and come back. The interviewing manager, Randall, dangled a set of keys in front of me. He seemed like a nice enough guy, if a bit guarded. Not too difficult. You look like a Compton boy. Don't I need a commercial driver's license? I'd actually driven the campus shuttle for 2 years during college, but it hadn't been a large enough bus to need a commercial license. I'd made that clear on my application. Do you think you're able to drive a rig of this size? Well, yeah, but... Then don't worry about it, Randall told me. How far is the turnaround? For most it's 4 hours, but it could be less. That's what we're testing you on. So, you want me to speed? In a 5-ton vehicle? That I don't have a license for? More like 15 tons, and absolutely not. Don't speed. That would taint the results. We want to time how long it takes you naturally. The logic made no sense. Don't speed, but cross your fingers it goes quick? But it didn't matter anymore. The whole situation was sketchy. This was multiple levels of illegal, and federal prison wasn't what I imagined the keynote speaker meant by seize every opportunity. In her graduation speech, I was steeling myself to tell all this to Randall and walk straight out of the office when I forgot to mention, he said, $800 in compensation for your time. 10 minutes later, I was in the cab, turning the key. I noticed another man, similar age to me, sitting in the idling cab of another semi just across the parking lot. Another applicant, Randall explained. It's easier for us if we time multiple of you at the same time. The other man gave me a friendly wave, then just as pleasantly flipped me off, which was such a confusing series of events. I decided to log it away for later to process fully. Dead meat, he mouthed, though it could have just as easily been red beets. What's the address of the turnaround? I asked, waving my phone to show the open Google Maps app. No phones, Randall said. Instead, he explained how I would recognize the turnaround point, a red-roofed, unmanned weighing station some way down Route 333, along with a few other basic guidelines. 1. Don't use your phone for any reason, not even for music. Leave it on airplane mode, or better, just power it off. Even if there's an emergency, use a handheld radio. 2. Do feel free to listen to the stereo, though. Station 86.9 FM is country, if that's your thing, but probably steer clear of station 96.5. 3. No picking up hitchhikers. Not even if they look like they're hurt. Not even if they're begging and crying for a ride. Especially if they're begging and crying. Really, don't. For around halfway there, your rig will stall and come to a stop. Don't panic. Don't turn it off. Don't get out. Put it in park. And wait exactly 1 minute and 47 seconds. After that, the engine should start back up. If, for some reason, the rig doesn't start after that time, well, it should, but if it doesn't, I asked, hide, he said. Close your eyes until it does, but it should. Okay then, these are all spelled out with more details in the employee handbook, he told me when I understandably tried asking more questions. You shouldn't have to worry about most of them unless you get the job. Just don't use your phone. And most importantly, don't freak out when the rig stalls out. But how do you already know it's going? He raised his hands and shook his head to signal no more questions. $800, I reminded myself. There's something slightly soul-sucking in the realization of how low a price you can be bought for. Then again, there's something soul-sucking in being a broke, unemployed college grad. So pick your poison. One last thing. Randall tells me from underneath the window, whatever you see, whatever happens, don't ever stop driving. Not at all ominous. He winked. I watched as the other interviewee pulled away, first my competitor. I decided now that I really did have a second to process his introduction. Twat, after I'd adjusted my mirrors and seat, I pulled out after him, highly aware of the timer in Randall's hand as he shrunk to a pinprick in my rear view. Underscore. The most nerve-wracking part of the whole experience? No GPS. I wasn't worried about getting lost. The instructions were basically to drive straight on Route 333 until I arrived there, but there was something disconcerting about knowing if I did get lost, I wasn't allowed to look at my location. I don't think I'd ever actually driven anywhere new without my phone. I already know what you boomers out there will say. My generation is soft. We never learned to do things the hard way. We're addicted to technology. To which I'll respond, true, fair really. But also you tried giving up your iPhone. The first minutes of the drive went smooth. The highway was a bit twisty, but otherwise calm with a gorgeous view. Gargantuan trees, some variant of redwood, I assumed towered over me from every side. But pretty as it was, the two-lane road was practically deserted. No other cars passed me. None snuck up behind me. I flipped on my headlights to deal with the shade. It was a bit eerie, truthfully. After a while, I started catching glimpses of Competitor Man's truck through the trees. I'd pass a bend, and his rig would flash between branches and trunks. He'd disappear around turns, but I was catching up how to get around him. The road was thin, and if this was some sort of speed race, there was no way he'd pull over to let me get by. Maybe another lane would open up soon. Maybe if I honked, it would spook him enough to let me pass. Turns out it didn't matter. Just as I was solidly behind him, my truck went silent. There was no sputter of life eking from a motor, nor the dying cough of an engine. The gas pedal simply stopped working. My rig slowed some more, then stopped. I was prepared for this. I waited. In my head I counted. Randall had known. Somehow he'd known my rig would sputter out at some point, but he hadn't seemed concerned. Was it planned? Some way to see how we reacted in stressful situations? I found myself wildly looking around for a security camera. Don't be paranoid. Just like he'd told me. Somewhere around second number 100, the engine roared back to life. My freight truck chugged forward, and when I applied gas, it sped up. All right then. The rest of the drive was blessedly uneventful. I never caught back up to Competitor Man, but smooth otherwise. At some point, the trees petered out to a short stretch of desert highway, and then the red roof weighing station. I slowed down and looked at the time. This couldn't be right. I'd only been driving for half an hour or so, and the other truck had never passed me. Randall had said it usually took several hours to get here. This couldn't be the correct place. It was though. It had to be. I was still on the Route 333. I was sure of it. This was the first weighing station, and the description matched perfectly. I pulled out the digital camera Randall had given me and snapped a picture. If I was wrong, at least I could claim stupidity. Not that I'd been trying to cheat. Maybe that would be enough. I maneuvered the rig through the unmanned station and headed back the way I'd come. Eventually, I reached the redwoods. The world transformed from sunlight back to shadow and mist. Tendrils of fog wafted above exposed roots. I'd be back in just a few minutes now. Then the truck started to slow. I swore, not again. Sure enough, though, the rig came to a stop at a section of forest so shaded it could have been evening. Bugs sped in and out of the headlight beams. Something was off. Nerves, I told myself. This whole thing is strange. So you're overthinking. That was usually the problem. Overthinking. Spiraling until I shut down. It was the reason I majored in a subject that let me be quiet and clack away on my laptop. It was the reason I got a job on the campus shuttle, where I wouldn't have to talk to anybody, and applied for this position in the first place. It had been building for months, years maybe, this feeling that something in my life was wrong. Off. But after I'd gone through and eliminated the only things it could be, all I was left with was me. The thing that was broken was me. And maybe that wasn't something I could realistically run away from, but I could sure try. For the first time in months, while driving Route 333, I'd felt normal in the thrill of leaving something behind. But now I was stopped stagnant, and it was all back again. And then another realization. How long has it been? I hadn't counted this time. There hadn't been a need after last time, but it felt like at least a few minutes had passed. Maybe. I started counting in my head. 20s, 45, 60. I gave up. It had definitely been longer than a minute 47. The truck still wasn't moving. The first cold edges of true fear crept into me, up my spine, and snaking around my heart. I waited some more. I swore some more. When neither of those delightfully brilliant options worked, I put the truck in park, cracked the door, and hopped down. Outside was chillier than I'd imagined. Weird. Sure, it was shady, but it was still summer. I considered trying to pop the hood of this thing for some reason. All men, even those of us with no mechanical knowledge, feel a sense of control by ponderously examining broken engines, but for a massive beast like this, I couldn't pretend to know where to start. "Hello?" I called. In the mist, off in the distance, there almost looked like a figure. Fog rolled through, and they vanished. Did they live around here? Maybe I could ask them for help. When the mist cleared, there was nobody. Hide. That's what Randall had told me, albeit offhandedly. Hide and close your eyes. But that just felt silly. Some way for him to distract me from realizing he'd stuck me with a crappy vehicle. Either way, I needed to go back in for my phone. Forget the rules. I was calling for help. The handle was locked. I rounded to the other side and tried that handle too. Locked. Incessant swearing might not have solved my problems the first 2 times, but no reason not to try in a third, right? The coldness clutched my heart until I could barely breathe. I watched as more mist rolled into the trees, and the figure it was back, closer. For a second time, I almost called out for help. Hide. Before I could overthink my overthinking. Before I could question how stupid I'd looked, I dropped to my stomach and rolled under the truck. Then I squeezed my eyes shut. A set of footsteps approached the vehicle. I started to look up, but stopped myself and pressed my face to the asphalt where I wouldn't be tempted. Another set joined it. Then another. They started moving faster, in no particular pattern around the rig. A dozen pittering dogs' feet, except heavier, more intentional. Frantic. Something tried at the door handles. I could hear the frustrated yank. Over and over. They were searching the area, looking for a way in. Don't look. Don't look. Don't. Above me, the engine roared to life. All at once, the 100 desperate footsteps stopped completely. I wasted no time. I rolled from my hiding spot, scrambled across the deserted road from the now unlocked door, and threw the rig into drive. Within seconds, I was hurtling back down the highway toward safety. That's it, I thought. I passed my twisted test, and now I get to return safely and refuse this sick job once and for all. And that was all true. I was safe. I would get to scream at Randall. Just not before seeing what was behind the next turn. It came from nowhere. I swerved like crazy to avoid it. By the time I even processed what was obstructing the road, I'd already passed it with no chance of slowing back down. It had been my competitor's truck. Totally stopped, diagonal across the whole road. And the man who'd been driving it, he'd been splayed across the hood, skewered through by a tree branch the length of a door. His eyes had been torn out. What was that? Now, let's not get too excited. Randall looked up from his desk, back at the truck yard. What were those things? Who did that to the other guy? Other guy? He was stabbed by a tree. His eyes were literally empty sockets. Randall sighed, not the sigh of oh no. There's a crazy man yelling at me. The sigh of oh great. More paperwork. Unit 50, he's spoken to his handheld radio. There's a cleanup a few miles in. Sounds like a messy one. Maybe give an hour to let the forest dwellers settle down before going in for a retrieval. Cleanup? We have to call the police. We're not calling anybody. They prefer not to know about these things. We can't just leave him there. He held up his hands. I know you're in shock, but as I said, let's try to calm ourselves. Yelling isn't helping anyone. I get it. We'll make sure to retrieve him. It's totally understandable why you turn back early. Early? For some reason, it was this odd, insignificant fact that finally yanked me from my frenzy. As unjust as murder might be, to a recent graduate, nothing will ever top the injustice being failed on a test I know I passed. I didn't come back early. His eyebrows pinched together. I pulled out the digital camera and shoved the image of the turnaround point in his face. Slowly, his expression opened up to one of shock and awe. You were gone an hour, maybe an hour 30 at most. Randall considered. Then he stood, smiled, and stuck out his hand. You've got a job. I got a what? Have you not been listening? I just saw a dead man. I nearly died myself. There's absolutely no way I'm accepting whatever joke of a job this is. 140,000 base, plus benefits and overtime. 10 minutes later, I was signing the offer. Go ahead. Hate me if you want. But never underestimate what you yourself wouldn't do under the weight of a six-figure student debt. If you're going to be unhappy, no matter where you are, you may as well be unhappy and rich. It was only hours later, after my flight home, after I was safe in my bed on campus, and the whole interview felt like a distant nightmare, that I finally cracked open my new employee handbook. I found a section on the 1 minute 47 second incident. Section 9.a. It explained what Randall had, that I should count in my head, not freak out, and usually nothing would happen. There was some additional explanation too. If your engine does not immediately come to life after the waiting period is concluded, then close your eyes and hide. The things in the forest will eventually lose interest. Above all, remain in your vehicle. If you leave at any point during the hunting ceremony, they will know your scent. You will never rest again. Story 4. If you see a man drowning in Lake Wilcox, don't help him. I know, it sounds awful, but I have to warn you anyway. It's not worth the risk, even if the person drowning might not be him. You'll never see his face through the splashes, so don't think it's a simple matter of recognition. They say he only appears at night, but I've heard a story or two from the daylight hours over the years. It's never safe to rescue someone. The locals all know this. But I didn't. Not until it was far too late. It was summer of 2006. I was 19 back then, just a dumbass kid shouldering a dangerous feeling of invincibility. Enough so that I had become a volunteer firefighter straight out of high school. Most of my friends went off to college, so the semester months of late 2005 had been quite lonely. I saw my best friend, Carson, over winter break, and she must have picked up on my low mood. I'll tell you what, Joey, she had said. Next summer, I'll grab Trish and Cole, and we'll all go on a camping trip. At the time, the very idea caused my heart to grow wings and soar to cloud 9. I wish I could forget that feeling. Maybe the fall wouldn't hurt as much from a lesser height. Trish and Cole had been our friends since 6th grade. Carson and I took bets on how long it would take those two to get together, but we both lost. They were smart enough to stay just friends until they were accepted to the same college. While I had known Carson since kindergarten, they were still very dear friends of mine all the same. The four of us had gone camping with Cole's parents in the summer of 1999. The group unanimously considered the trip to be our finest hour. Hell, I still have a picture of us from that trip on my desk at home. You can clearly see Cole looking at Trish, and we gave him shit about it for years. Some days, I even turned around to face me as I write. As the summer approached, our excitement grew. We'd already bought the tents, some fishing gear, and a cooler for our illicit beverages. We borrowed the rest from Cole's family. We planned most of the details out, and by we I mean Trish, as she didn't appreciate spontaneity like the rest of us did, and I had the printed directions to Lake Wilcox in hand when Carson rolled up in her 1992 Tahoe. I quickly threw my gear and backpack in the rear before jumping into the passenger seat. The moment I sat down, Carson leaned over and gave me a hug. Hey, wait, there he is, came Cole's voice in the back seat as he clapped a massive hand on my shoulder. It's so good to see you, beamed Trish as she held Cole's other hand. How have you been? Can't complain, I replied. I had my first house fire last week. Everyone made it out before we even got there. And yes, They had their cat with them. I've never seen a cat looking so pissed off. Jesus, Joey, said Cole, shaking his head. You sound way too excited when you talk about burning buildings. Carson glanced over, agreement clear in her eyes. Yeah, I know, I said as I rubbed the back of my neck. Just promise us you won't be stupid and rush in, Trish added. I want this trip to be an annual thing, and it won't be the same without your dumb ass. I smiled. I promise. So, Carson interrupted, you gonna tell me which way we're going, first officer dipshit? The rest of the 4-hour drive went much the same way. It gave us plenty of time to catch up with one another, and Cole took full advantage of the cooler within arm's reach. Trish frowned disapprovingly as he stumbled while exiting Carson's Tahoe. The rest of us followed suit, and together we walked across a gravel lot towards a tree line. I'll give it to Trish. She picked one hell of a spot. The trees were tall, yet not so dense as to block too much sunlight or hinder hiking. A perfect combination of shade and the space to toss a frisbee. I could already see several perfect locations to set up our tents. And then there was Lake Wilcox itself. The waters reached the shore no more than 50 feet from where we would ultimately set up camp. An old dock stood nearby, going out about 20 feet into the lake. The surface was calm, but moved enough to suit any worries of still water. Oh, hell yeah, Cole cheered. This is going to be so awesome. Babe, you're incredible. Trish huffed, but couldn't quite hide her smile. Yeah, Trish, this looks perfect. Carson added, how did you find this place? Google Earth, Trish replied with pride. It looked like a great place to camp. The nearest town is only 2 miles away in case we end up needing anything, she said, glancing at the notoriously forgetful Cole. Plus, I couldn't find anything online about people camping here, so I figured we'd probably have the place to ourselves. Well, it looks like you were right, I chimed in. I don't see any campsites. Hell, it looks like nobody's been here in a while. Well, let's hurry up and get our tents up, so we can start drinking, said Cole, effortlessly knocking the smile clear off Trish's face. Once we were set up, the fun really began. The drinks were flowing, the fish were biting, and Cole had the time of his life as we tossed the football back and forth. He blew out his knee during his senior season, and I could tell how much he enjoyed catching passes again. Carson and Trish were arranging small rocks to build a makeshift fire pit. As Carson straightened the last rock to her liking, she stood up and took off her shirt to reveal the bikini top she had on beneath. Before I could react, the rest of her outerwear was in her tent, and she was racing towards the dock. Cannonball, she shouted as she entered the water with a massive splash. We all laughed and started stripping down to our swimsuits and leapt in one by one. The water felt incredible against my skin as I broke the surface. Carson beamed at me. Come on, Joey, let's swim out a bit. Look, I'm not a perfect man. Although I would have never risked a friendship, I did have a thing for Carson back then. It didn't take much for her to convince me to do something. Soon, the depth was beyond where our toes could touch, and Carson challenged me to a race by swimming at full speed the moment I looked back to see our other friends. Her laughter was cut short when her feet touched the bottom again, about 100 yards from the shore. Hey, Joey, come check this out, she said as she stood up. Sure enough, my feet soon touched the bottom as well. At my full height, the water barely reached my waist. It must be a sandbar, she said. This is pretty cool. Yeah, you're right. Think we should call Trish and Cole out here. Carson looked back towards the shore. The couple were having a blast splashing each other back in the shallows, as if we weren't even here. Nah, she said, as she lowered her body back into the shallow water. It's like our own private island. She paused. Unless you've got a problem with being stranded on an island with me, why would I? Yes, readers. I couldn't read a flashing neon sign. Anyway, we stayed right there for around half an hour, only swimming back as the sun began to slide below the horizon. Soon, the four of us were comfortably surrounding a small campfire. Hey, can I talk to you for a sec? Cole asked me quietly. Yeah, of course, I said as I set my beard down. Cole beckoned me over, and I joined him a short distance away. All right, what's up, man? Cole rubbed the back of his head sheepishly. My dumb ass left protection at home. I mean, I've got a gun in my bag. I replied. No, dude, the other protection. Oh, well, good job. Buddy, if you're asking me for one, I don't have any. Damn, I was hoping you finally had the balls to make a move on Carson. Hurtful. Anyway, said Cole, do you think Carson would let me borrow her Tahoe so I can get some in town? Why are you asking me? Ask her. And are you even sober? Yeah, I'm good, he assured me. I noticed my fuck up when I put my stuff in our tent, so I haven't had a drink since we got here. Can you ask her? I don't want Trish to know. I rolled my eyes. Whatever, man. I'll see what I can do. Carson was hesitant, but Cole really had sobered up in the hours we'd been here. So she agreed and gave him directions to the nearby town. Cole fed Trish a story, wanted to grab some more snacks, and he left. By this point, Carson and I were quite drunk and returned to our tents once Trish assured us that she would be all right waiting for Cole. I didn't wake up until I heard Carson scream, "Trish, oh my God, Joe, get out here now." I never moved so fast in my life. I was out of my tent like a shot and immediately saw Carson kneeling at the water's edge. My heart sank as I sprinted towards her, but she wasn't alone. Though only lit by moonlight, I could still see that she was dragging Trish ashore, and Trish was unresponsive. My training kicked in, and I quickly rolled Trish onto her back to clear her airway. I couldn't feel a pulse, so I began CPR. Water flowed from her open mouth with the first compression. As soon as the water stopped, I began mouth to mouth, but Carson stopped me. "I'll do that. You focus on her heart." I pushed down on her chest with everything I had. The sickening crunch of my friend's ribs breaking under my hands is a feeling that will never leave me, but it was no use. As soon as I had a proper look at her face, I knew Trish was gone. Her skin had gone pale, with a telltale blue tint of asphyxiation. Her open, unfocused eyes were the final sign that my efforts were in vain. Slowly, I stopped my compressions, and Carson buried her face on my shoulder and began to cry. I hadn't even noticed my own tears until that moment. I reached down and closed her eyes. "Carson, what happened?" I stepped out to pee, and I saw her floating in the water," she responded between soft sobs. She was face down. I looked down at the body of our friend. She was still wearing her gym shorts and tank top, as if she hadn't planned on entering the water. I steadied myself as best I could. "We need to call the police," I said gently. Carson nodded and rubbed her eyes, before standing up and walking back towards her tent to grab her phone. Something else was bothering me, though. Trish had been a member of our school's swimming team. For her to drown like this made no sense. But there was one other thing. To this day, Carson doesn't know what I saw in the water as we pulled Trish out. Eyes glazed over as if dead until they blinked, but they immediately vanished after that. At the time, I assumed it had been a large catfish or something. "I have no signal," came Carson's voice from behind me. "Shit, I'll go try." Sure enough, my phone also had no service. Same with Trish's. And Cole has a truck. I thought aloud as the full helplessness of the situation hit me. "Cole," whispered Carson. "Oh, God, how are we going to tell him?" "I'll tell him," I said. "I've had to do it before." What Carson didn't know was the day after the house fire my department had put out, I responded to a car accident. I had to tell the driver that his brother in the passenger seat was gone. "Help me." The voice came with a flurry of frantic splashing in the lake behind me. I whipped around to see a man, foundering a few hundred feet from the shore. Instinct once again took over, and I tossed my phone aside. But before I could jump into the water, I felt a hand clamp down on my shoulder. "Wait," came Carson's voice from behind me. "Let go," I said, trying to shrug her hand off of me, but she gripped tighter. "Joseph, something's not right." We had been friends for 15 years at that time, and not once had she called me that. Not just that, there was a fear in her voice I had never heard before. It was enough to stop me in my tracks. I looked back, and Carson was staring out at the drowning man. Look where he is. I turned back toward the lake and froze. The turbulent water was directly over the sandbar. The man was splashing in less than 3 feet of water. My body went cold. My instinct screamed as if I had come face to face with a mountain lion. We watched the lake in silence for what felt like an eternity as the man continued to call for help until he stopped. The lake instantly fell silent, along with any wildlife in the area. It was as if the woods themselves held their breath, and a pale face began emerging from the water where the man had been. It broke the surface, and it just kept rising. It finally came to a stop around 6 feet above the water, and that was when I noticed the body of a man beneath it. He stood motionless on the surface. As he stared at us, another detail emerged. His neck was broken. The dead eyes staring back at us were nearly vertical. The man let out a horrific screech and sprinted across the water straight towards us. Far, far faster than any man ever could, his head flopping against his shoulder the entire way. His movements weren't natural, almost like a section of film with too many cuts and sloppy editing. Before we could even react to what was happening, he came to an instant halt at the same point the water did, less than 4 feet from Carson. The man glanced at the ground before him and glared at us with utter malice clear in his broken face. "What's going on? Who the fuck is that?" Came Cole's voice from somewhere behind us. The man's head snapped upright instantly. A terrifying smile full of rotten, broken teeth crept across his features before taking a step backward into the water. Cole must have noticed Trish's body as he let out a cry and rushed to her side, hopelessly shaking his dead fiancée. "What did you do to her?" he roared, tears forming in his eyes as he turned to face the smiling man, who responded by taking another step back into the lake and holding his grin. "Cole, don't!" Carson screamed, but it was too late. Cole charged his partner's killer. "You son of a bitch! I'll kill Y.O. Dash," was all he got out before being pulled underwater. I dove in after him without a second thought. He was our friend. He would have done the same for us. I swam after the bubble trail as fast as I could, but I only made it 50 feet before something tightened around my neck and snapped my head backward, down into the pitch-black water. I felt a thud below me, as if something heavy had impacted the lake floor. The shimmering moonlight was barely visible from the surface, about 20 feet above me. My hands clawed at the invisible rope around my neck. As my lungs began to burn, my vision started to blur. My movement slowed, though I refused to give up as a shadow blocked the dim light from above. Carson. She'd found me. I hadn't noticed her following me into the water after Cole. She grabbed my arm and pulled against the invisible rope as it fought to take my life. She must have noticed my struggle against my own throat, and she reached for the force holding me under, and it vanished. I was free. Carson dragged me to the surface just before the inevitable reflex to breathe could draw water into my lungs. Seconds after we surfaced, a muffled screech emitted from the bubbling waters below. It sounded pissed. "Swim," she shouted. Leading up to this moment, I wasn't a particularly fast swimmer. However, survival instincts easily doubled my normal pace as we frantically swam for the bank. But we weren't the only ones. A stream of bubbles was streaking towards us from behind. I fucking felt the man swim past me just before Carson went under. Without a second thought, I pushed myself back underwater after her. But whatever this thing was put banshees to shame. A scream reverberated through the water with enough force to permanently damage my hearing. But I could see Carson surfacing again. We ran the moment our feet touched the bottom and scrambled ashore. I looked over my shoulder, and man, do I regret it. The man was once again standing on the surface of less than an inch of water behind us. His head was once again hanging by his shoulder, but he reached up, grabbed his hair, and used it to hold his head upright as he glared at us. The waters around him grew turbulent as his milky, dead eyes narrowed in pure hatred. Then he vanished. The water became still. The world was instantly as it should be. Well, almost. Cole never resurfaced. Everything after that was a blur. The local sheriff and his men recovered Trish's body from the shore where we left her. There were funerals furious, grieving relatives and blackout drinking on my part. But even through the haze, I noticed one thing. The deputies were very careful to avoid touching the water as they worked. They knew that was 19 years ago, despite my best efforts to ruin things by becoming an alcoholic. Carson married me anyway once I sobered up for good. We spent years researching the history of the area, and eventually we found a name, Gabriel Barnes, an alleged child killer in the 1830s. Barnes disappeared from existence around the same time Sheriff Wilcox's son did. After what we went through, I guess Wilcox tied a noose to an anchor or a rock around Barnes' neck and threw him into the lake that would soon carry his name. As for how we survived that night, when our friends didn't, we eventually realized that the only difference between us and them was a solid iron bracelet Carson wore on her left wrist that day. There's one more thing I haven't mentioned. At the bottom of that lake, I saw something sticking out of the mud, the end of a human femur. As I write this, my wife is loading our scuba gear into our truck. We know where the bastard is. More importantly, we know how to hurt him. We're gonna burn those fucking bones and put the son of a bitch down. But I'm leaving this as a warning in case we don't come back. If you see someone foundering in Lake Wilcox, let them drown. Story 5. And 3 insist he's still there. It's a decades-old joke. Cliché boomer humor. Probably been told almost as long as there have been telephones to call. It basically goes like this. A woman doesn't come home one night. The next day, she explains to her husband that she slept over at a friend's house. The husband calls his wife's 5 best friends. None of them know anything about it. A man doesn't come home one night. The next day, he tells his wife that he slept over at a friend's house. The wife calls her husband's 5 best friends. All of them say he had slept over, and 3 claim that he was still there. Of course, the number of friends varies, etc., but it's a pretty specific joke, so it has fewer forms than most. It's just there to go, huh? Women's friends are catty and insincere, while boys are rude or die for the guy who said, nice shirt, one time at a Wendy's. Cliché stereotype stuff. Now, if the joke happened to you, unlike some weirder ones you wouldn't bat an eye, either your friends suck, or they're awesome depending on which side of the joke you're playing. But, well, you'll understand in a moment, I guess. My marriage has been pretty smooth. Me and my husband haven't been together long. We only got our first apartment together a year ago. We're still pretty young, so we aren't always responsible. It happened around the holiday season. Not right around Christmas or anything, just in the general time. Maybe it was around the 3rd. The old gang went bar hopping because it was the anniversary of when someone did something. I was friends with some of them too, but I could never figure that one out. I don't even think it happened on the same date every time. Anyway, I came home one night and he didn't. The next morning, Tom, my husband, comes and tries to look like he isn't a hungover train wreck run through a washing machine and miserably failing. Oh, well, hello. I greeted him with icy cordiality. I was brewing my morning coffee. It was a weekend, so I didn't need to head anywhere right away. I'm sure that it played into his decision in the first place. Sorry. He abashedly scratched the back of his head. Got a little too wild last night. And just where did you get a little too wild yesterday come in today? I certainly think I had the right to be asking that. It wasn't any sort of party he had planned, or had told me about at least, that justified staying the night. Had it been, I certainly would have been more involved. Sorry, really. I got a little more wasted than I thought. Crashed at a friend's place. He rushed over to pour his own coffee, gulping it black as fast as he could to fight his obvious hangover. And matron, and what friend was this? I questioned. I was being hard on him, but it certainly wasn't unjustified considering what he just pulled. I think anyone would have expected a call at least. His brows furrowed in obvious confusion. I was a little relieved not to see him go right to guilty dodging, but annoyed that he struggled to recall even that basic fact. God, was it Jay? Don? It feels like I was at all of them. I think that having seen that joke recently influenced my decision by putting the idea in my head. Normally I wouldn't bother interrogating his friends. Even if I were truly pissed, I would come up with a better way to press the issue than that. That time, though, I decided to go with the first idea that popped into my head. It wouldn't reveal anything useful, but it would make him squirm a little as payback for his terrible judgment. Okay, I'll call them. I had barely thought it before I said out loud. Huh, He was confused. Of course, he was also still nursing a horrible hangover and next to zero sleep. So obviously that was to be expected. I'll call them, see where you stayed last night. The way I said it firmly communicated this wasn't optional. Okay, cool, he mumbled, already nursing his third coffee. Let's see, you mentioned Jay, Don, Tony, Gene, and Bill. I thought through each good friend I knew would have been there. I dialed Jay. It took a second attempt. No big surprise. He would have been just as hungover. Finally, he answered. Jay. Huh. An indistinct grumble came through the line. Did Tom stay the night with you? I asked, try not to sound accusatory. Yeah? He didn't message you? Did he make it home? I think I heard him leave like an hour ago. He paused. Wait, what time is it? Don't hold me to that guess. His voice was a slurred mess of exhaustion and confusion. It's all right, Jay. I think he just arrived. I hung up. Clearly, he needed more time to sleep it off. So that's that. It was Jay. Tom was clearly happy to end this quickly. You don't remember it being Jay's apartment you stumbled out of just an hour ago? I questioned. I don't think I can remember 10 minutes before I came through that door. He admitted. I was glad he was honest instead of going straight to insisting it was totally Jay and that he remembered everything now. I want to test something. I was honest too. Don. I dialed the next number. HNK. I heard a misshapen snort. Yeah, Ellie? Did Tom crash with you? Yeah, just left 20 minutes ago. Should be home soon. Don't kick his ass too hard. He sounded a little better off than Jay, despite his undignified opening. You don't need to lie for me, dog. Tom spoke up, sounding terribly embarrassed by the whole thing. The fuck? Don sounded confused. You're home already. I heard a confused chuckle from the other side. I swear to God, T, if you weren't here, I don't know who the fuck was. I could almost feel the defensive shrug through the line. He's been home over 5 minutes already. No way he could have gotten here that fast. I wasn't going to start a fight with Don, but I had to point out the reality. I know. Don admitted. I must have lost track of time. He seemed uncertain. We'll figure out. I made sure not to sound too harsh. He was legitimately confused seeming, even if I was sure that it was too much alcohol and a misguided intent to be a good friend. Bye. I hung up. That was so messed up. Tom chuckled. You know what they say about guy friends. I wasn't even angry at Don. Everyone will say you were there, and two will insist you still are. Yeah, I know. He just seemed confused. Must have been one of the other guys. Tom's face, slowly regaining its life and color, betrayed confusion of his own. I guess I'll find out. I started dialing the next number. Wait, you're still doing this? He questioned. Let me enjoy the spectacle, and maybe I'll forget to be mad at you. I pointed out the obvious. That made him quiet. Hey, Gene. I eagerly greeted the next on my list. Yeah? He vaguely tried to cover up his obvious hangover. Did Tom crash with you yesterday? I asked the same question. Did he? He's still here. I had to stifle a laugh. Tom looked mortified. I held up a hand to stop him from speaking up and ruining the fun. Could you put him on? I wondered just how he would get out of this. Sure. I looked at Tom in befuddlement. He looked equally lost. Just what was Gene going to do? He couldn't fake my husband's voice if his life depended on it. Hey, man, get up. I faintly heard him talking over the phone. He was clearly holding it away from his face. Yeah, my blood ran cold. That sounded exactly like Tom. Your wife's calling. Bro, I told you should move your ass. You're screwed, man. I could hear the phone get chucked onto a bed, and someone fumbled to pick it up. Hey, Ellie. Tom's face contorted in horror at a much clearer sound of what was unmistakably his own voice coming from over the phone. It was groggy and slurred, but absolutely his own. What is this? My words were pure shock. I'm sorry. I got way too smashed. I conked out right here with Gene. I should have had someone drive me home. And I definitely should have messaged you. Why yes. You should have. For a moment I wasn't sure if I should probe for more. but I was just too terrified by what I was hearing. I hung up the call. What the fuck was that? What in the living hell was that? I was freaking out. I could feel myself hyperventilating. It's got to be a prank. My husband was clearly barely keeping together any better than I was. Let's not panic. You know AI these days. They must have just heard the same joke you did and are doing a bit. I wasn't convinced. He obviously wasn't either. It wasn't impossible that could be the explanation, but it seemed very, very improbable. What was the explanation then? Without an answer to that, I knew what I had to do. Tony. I called the next friend. Hey, Tony? Yeah. Sorry. Cleaning up over here. He sounded markedly better than the others. That's all right. I just wanted to check. Did Tom stay at your place? Tom, did you really not call Ellie? Tony shouted away from the phone, annoyance clear in his voice. I lost my phone, man. Sorry. My husband. Yet another one called back. Jeez. Yeah, he's right here. I'll send him home when he's done cleaning my sink out. You can guess why. Okay. Thank you. I'll call back later. I stumbled through hanging up. Something felt so deeply, terribly wrong. My hands were sweating. They really prepared these perfect responses after a night of getting stone cold smashed at bars? No way. This wasn't a joke, and it wasn't okay. The world was somehow wrong. Terribly wrong. I misdialed Bill 3 times before getting through. Tom just started pacing the room, racking his brain for what could be happening, or trying to remember. I was too focused on the last call to ask. Bill! I couldn't hide the desperation in my voice. Yeah, you all right? He sounded concerned at my panic. Shit, did Tom not tell you? He stayed over. Everyone's okay. He guessed at the source of my panic. Is he still there? I didn't know which I wanted. If he said no, I would have no more answers. If he said yes, I didn't know if I could keep it together hearing another impossible husband. Yeah, hey, time's up, buddy. I could hear the phone being passed off. Hey, oh sorry, I lost my phone. I crashed safely here the whole night. I know I should have had Bill text. I guess I drank too much. You can't be. I'm here. I came home. I'm right here. Tom finally snapped. There was a long, tense pause. That can't be, man. We crashed right here at Bill's the whole night. Tom, the Tom on the other side, quietly insisted. Who are you? What are you? I was borderline sobbing as I demanded answers. It's me, Ellie. It's Tom. Who is over there with you? I could sense a quiet desperation in the voice of the phone. I hung up. I had to. I couldn't answer it after all. What is happening? What happened to you? I broke down sobbing at last. Nothing made sense, least of all the equally broken-looking man across the table from me. I don't know. He muttered, barely able to speak himself. I don't know. I can't remember anything. I know we went out. I can't remember anything. He kept repeating it, trying to force himself to remember. He never did. We tracked his phone to a bar restroom across town. None of the other Toms came home. Story 6. The square root of all evil. I signed the lease because the hallways smelled like old lemons and the supers kept their keys on hooks that looked like fingers. The building had those thin, tired walls that make every neighbor feel like an organ sharing your blood. I told myself that was a good thing. I'd hear someone cry for help. I'd hear a fight before it got out of hand. I'd hear a laugh and remember what it's for. The door across from mine opened the first night, as if it had been waiting. She leaned on the jamb like she'd grown there. Late 20s, hair a spill of black rope, a cotton t-shirt turned inside out, one sock, the other foot bare and strangely clean. You're the new one, she said. I'm Lena. Evan, I said, and immediately hated how smiling made my teeth feel on display. I added, nice to meet you, in the voice I save for strangers I don't want to remember. Her gaze flicked over my boxes, as if she could read the contents from the tape's shine. We're mirror apartments, she said. If you ever get lost, knock on mine and I'll reverse it for you." "Reverse what?" "Whatever room you're standing in." She pointed to my door number, then to hers, like an equation. I went to say something neutral, something that didn't reveal how lonely I was, but she slipped back inside, and the deadbolt thunked, and the hall returned to the sound of a building breathing through its vents. The lemons came from a mop bucket someone had given up putting away. The supers, an old couple who spoke with each other more than anyone else, kept their keys like trophies beside a bulletin board scored with staple scars. A flyer dated 3 months ago asked if anyone had seen a cat named Brooke. A bottle left by the mailbox said, "Do not drink," and traps inside. The mailboxes were heavy steel with narrow mouths that bit catalogs until they bled glue. I stacked my boxes into the shape of furniture, boiled pasta, ate it out of a coffee mug. I wasn't sure it was clean and listened, pipes clicking to themselves, someone dragging something heavy, and then stopping to rest. The quiet war of small machines. I slept in my clothes with a window open to the soft industry of the city. It was the smell that woke me the second night, chlorine cut with metal. It seeped through the seam around my door like fog around a tomb lid. I lay there trying to place it, then gave up and went to the hall. Lena's door was open a thumb's width. The interior dark, conditioner cool. I made the kind of mistake that yields consequences and knocked. "Come in," she said from the dark. I didn't, but she did open the door wider and step back. I waited, peering past her shoulder. Everything inside was arranged with that careful kind of disarray that looks accidental. Books stacked like steps, towels folded into the idea of softness, a cactus in a teacup that had never held tea. A long silver tub behind a half-drawn curtain gave off the chlorine bite. "Pool chemicals," she said, catching my face. "I use it to clean grout. Landlords don't, so someone has to. You could just use bleach." Her smile did something with one corner that suggested I'd failed a test. "Bleach is for paying rent. Chlorine is for living," she said. "Want a drink?" It was late. I had to be at a job I didn't truly have. A string of contract shifts pretending to be a career. But loneliness makes liars of sleep schedules. "Okay," I said. Her kitchen was clean in a way that felt staged. The trash can had a mint tucked under the lid, as if for breath. She poured whiskey into glasses that were heavier than they looked. "To mirror apartments," she said. We drank. It burned. The chlorine sat on top of it like a lid. "You just moved here?" she asked. "Yesterday." "Running from something?" "Running to something. Cheaper rent." It came out too quick. Those are the same thing in this city. She took a long sip, put her glass down, aligned the ring it left with a stain it matched. "You can call if you need to borrow sugar or a reason not to sleep. You always say things like that, only to people who deserve it." She turned her head like a bird, finding north. "You know your ex is here." It took me a moment to realize what she meant. The bar downstairs, the one with a fake Irish name and real Irish bartenders. I hadn't gone in. I had walked past fast each time, not looking, feeling the bruise on the world where Maya and I had sat not talking years ago. You saw her and the new husband. They were arguing about whether to say hi if they saw you. He wanted to be gracious. She wanted to be science. I shouldn't have asked, but I did. What's being science? Observation without contamination. She leaned her hip against the counter and watched me like she was waiting for me to do something she could name. "We should go," she said, "so she can test her theory." "I'm not." "Come on," she said, and grinned like mischief had been invented for this floor. The bar seemed constructed from end grain, the cut faces of wood and men. I had rehearsed accidentally running into Maya hundreds of times since she married Elliot, since she told me she wanted someone less thinking and more doing, as if those were disjoint sets. Seeing her at a corner table felt like getting the right answer on a question you never want to take. She saw me in that way people see things they plan not to see. Elliot turned, smiled with the charitable warmth of a sturdy man who made decisions with his shoulders. Maya's smile was a more precise instrument. It cut me into portions and plated them. "Evan," she said. "This is..." "Lena," Lena said before I could, and offered her hand. Maya shook it like a ref making coins disappear. Elliot offered to buy a round. We ended up sitting because all four of us were trained to pretend we didn't dread exactly this. Congratulations, I said to no one in particular. Married 3 months, Elliot said. We're still learning where the forks go. In the kitchen, Lena said, and Elliot laughed. Maya didn't. The conversation felt like bones moving under skin. Small talk about the building, about how the super couple had marriage like a password, about the cat on the bulletin board, and the ant traps, and how cheap rent comes salted with ghosts. Elliot asked what I did, and I told him nothing. He took it as a joke and did that laugh again, the kind that says he will forgive you when you don't need it. When the drinks were dead, Maya shifted the topic, like she was tuning radio. We actually ran into someone you know, she said to me. Online. What? DNA thing, she said, and sipped water like it was wine. You still keep your sample up, don't you? The genealogy site. Could be, I said, though I knew exactly which password I had forgotten. Someone matched, she said, her eyes on my face and nowhere else. Full sibling match. It happens. Kids show up. Clinics did weird things in the 90s. She smiled with no teeth. You're not a mystery, it seems. Congratulations, Lena said. Another reason to celebrate. I couldn't swallow for a second. I felt my pulse in the gaps of my molars. Who? I asked. Maya put the last of the water on her tongue and held it like a coin. Message them, she said. You'll see. We left with more or less the faces we brought. Outside, the night had that wet confessional quality it sometimes gets in September. Lena walked beside me like a secret that needed legs. Do you do those sights? I asked. I do everything I shouldn't, she said. You? I let my mother talk me into it. She wanted to prove she's part Basque. I heard my voice and didn't recognize the pettiness. They keep the data, you know? They sell it. Of course they do, she said cheerfully. Some of us are worth more in pieces. Back upstairs, I tried to sleep. The building made its list of noises. I turned over and over until that felt like a ritual. At 3:13, my phone buzzed. A match request. Full sibling. The name on the screen made the walls exhale. Lena C. The picture was her kitchen with the cactus. A short message. Hi. Quick weirdness. Call if you're awake? I stared at my ceiling like it was going to answer the questions my head was filing. Then I walked across the hall and knocked. She didn't act surprised. Come in, she said. Let's pretend it's not 4 a.m. You matched me. Seems like it, she said. I think someone made a mistake in a room with a spinning chair. She poured 2 drinks and didn't seem drunk, which made me worry. What does it mean? I asked, even though I knew what it meant. The blunt math of DNA, the way statistic weight becomes fate when it settles. That we share a father, she said. Or a mother. Do you want it to be the one you like less? I picture my mother smoking an apology into a tissue. I picture a man I'd never met donating parts of himself into a clinic refrigerator and calling it money. I picture 100 families with faces like mine and my face as a receipt. It doesn't have to be close, I said. It could be a lab screw-up. Could, she said, that single corner of her mouth doing its work. But I already called the clinic. The woman on the phone got very quiet when I gave her your birth date. Quiet like she had to put a hand somewhere to hold it down. You just called. I call all kinds of people at all kinds of hours, she said. It's my gift. We drank in a silence that never relaxed. When I left, she hugged me in that careful way you hug someone you might have a throwaway. Good night, mirror, she said. The days that followed felt threaded together by one kind of string. A new noise under the old ones. Lena moved around her place like someone conducting a band only she could hear. A new smell, ozone, joined the chlorine and lemons and sat in the hall like it paid rent. I saw her at odd hours returning with groceries that looked like bait. She smiled at the supers with the affection of someone who collects things. The building had a rhythm you obeyed or you didn't. A boy on the 5th floor practiced piano in the afternoons. His scales were clean like math. Someone on 2 ran their dryer at midnight every night like a prayer. I started hearing something not on the list. A soft, intermittent tapping at just the height a hand makes when you knock and don't want anyone to know. It came from inside Lena's apartment. It stopped when I listened too hard. We ran into Maya and Elliot again because that's what proximity is. A curse that pretends to be chance. Maya was wearing a new pair of glasses that made her look like she wanted to edit you. So, she asked. So what? So the match. It matches, I said. I figured, she said. They're efficient at that. Elliot squeezed her hand because it helps people like him to do something. We're happy for you, he said, and I hated how he said with like a door closing softly. I made the mistake of asking Maya how she was. She told me about her job, and then she told me a story she had been saving for the moment she wanted to watch me climb out of my skin. Do you ever think, she said, that some people are purely reactive? Like they don't have a self, they just reflect? You used to bend around me. It made me feel like I could be anything. It also made me feel like you were nothing. Elliot doesn't do that. She smiled small, as if she'd finished a proof. He is what he is. Congratulations, I said again, and realized I sounded like a priest who's late to confession. Back upstairs, Lena was in the hall with the superwoman, both of them looking at a brown streak on the wall at knee height. Russ, the super said. Pipe inside. Not Russ, Lena said. A dog leaned against it. She touched the streak with a gloved finger, smelled it, smiled. A medium dog with a problem. The super looked at me like I could control what my neighbor found interesting. I shrugged like a man who rented honesty by the month. The first missing poster went up 2 days later. Not for a dog. A woman this time. Smiling in the way people do for pictures taken by men who love them. The flyer was quick work. Printed at a bodega. A number with too few repeats to be real. The building hummed. The boy on 5 switched from scales to Debussy with the stubbornness of a child who will make beauty even if it hurts someone. It's hard to explain exactly when I recognize something was wrong, and harder to explain why I did nothing about it except take notes I wouldn't share with anyone. The chlorine got stronger. The ozone softened like a curtain had been closed around it. I saw Lena in the stairwell carrying a duffel bag with the shoulders of a person trained by sports she never played in public. She smiled at me like she had pockets full of prizes. Big plans tonight, Mirror? She asked. I have to do laundry. Liberation for Lint, she said and brushed past, leaving a smell I could only label as interference. The news found the building the way wind finds corners. Not police sirens. Not yet. A notification on my phone. Body discovered near the river. Woman last seen in our zip code. The article was old by the time I saw it. The city eats tragedy fast. No name given. Then one updated. Name given. Not someone I recognized. Then, no suspect. DNA sample collected from under nails. It took my brain an hour to notice the important part, and my body another hour to admit that it had. The important part wasn't the DNA. It was a phrase DNA consistent with a close male relative of redacted for ongoing investigation. I didn't sleep that night. I didn't sleep the next. Sleep began to feel like something I had to deserve. The second bar night was an accident. I went to push the door open just as Maya and Elliot were coming out, and we did the sidewalk choreography of strangers. We were just talking about you, Maya said, in a tone that suggested it wasn't slander if she would say it to my face. Beware that sentence, I said. It's never a blessing. Do you want a drink? Elliot asked. Because he's a good person, which is simply a different kind of complication. We sat at the bar and the bartender polished a glass like he was considering it for parole. Maya ordered soda water with lime and a bitter twist of judgment. She turned to me and set her voice to scalpel. Did you read that piece about police using family DNA? They say it's good for closure. They don't talk about collateral. Why do you keep bringing this up? I asked and felt my face flush and hated my face for telling on me. Because I know you, she said. I know you think your life happens to you. I know you assume stories end when you close your eyes. They don't. Elliot put his hand on her elbow. She shook it off like a dog shakes river water. And because, she said, I got a call from a block number asking if you and I had ever shared DNA. Intimately. They were polite about it. Clinical. But the question was the question. I stared at the bartender's hands until they weren't hands anymore. What did you say? I said we were careful, she said, which is a lie people tell to feel like they're not part of anything. Elliot paid the bill because that's what men like him do when they can't fix the world with a wrench. Maya kissed his cheek, a gesture as practiced as a signature. When they left, Lena appeared in the mirror behind the bar like a magician whose trick is timing. You look like a man who just learned he has organs, she said. How much do you know? Enough, she said. Enough to be fluent. She smiled at our twin faces in the mirror and tilted her head to make them match. Do you want to hear the story, or do you want to keep inventing it? Tell me. You were donor conceived, she said. Me too. Same clinic. The doctor liked to save money. Pool donors reuse what should have been discarded. Play armies with lives. He liked to think of it as charity. The law doesn't catch up to men like that. You and I were born near each other, but far enough that nobody would trip on a coincidence. She finished my whiskey. You can shake your head if it helps. I shook my head because it was something to do. That doesn't explain. Why the city smells like a swimming pool, she asked brightly. Why your phone keeps buzzing with news. Why you're suddenly interesting to people who do math with probability and handcuffs. She leaned close. You're not paying attention. That's the problem with mirrors. They show you, but only the surface. Tell me what's happening, I said, and heard the thin whine of pleading in my voice and wanted to bite it out. She put a hand on my knee like a nurse about to lie. Nothing, she said. Nothing is happening. Go home. I didn't. I sat there until the bar emptied, and the bartender put chairs on tables, and the night exhaled. When I went upstairs, there was a new flyer on the bulletin board. This one didn't have a picture, just a note written in a neat, angry hand. Stop poisoning the hallways. Some of us have children. Someone had underlined children twice, until it gnawed the paper. The knock started the next night at 3. A slow, patient tapping from inside Lena's door, as if someone were asking to be let out and had learned to be polite about it. I sat with my ear against the wood until my ear heard blood. I knocked back once, a childish, stupid thing. The tapping paused and then resumed, but closer, like it had made a choice. I don't know if it makes sense to say this, but the air got heavy, like a storm thinking something over. The building's bones ached. The piano on 5 had switched to minor, the dryer on 2 pause mid-prayer. I didn't open the door. I don't know what would have happened if I had. Maybe nothing. Maybe something that would make this all easier to tell because there would be a scene, an image, a nerve I could point to. Instead, I went to my bathroom and turned on the shower and sat on the tile and tried to hide from water. 2 days later, a different kind of paper appeared on the bulletin board. A letterhead with a badge and a phone number. This is a courtesy notification, it said, that officers may be conducting inquiries in your building related to an ongoing investigation. We appreciate your cooperation. There was a smiley face drawn in blue pen next to the word appreciate. Below, someone had written, clean your filth. Below that, in different ink, kids saw a dead cat in a bag. I didn't ask the supers. The supers never knew anything with their mouths. They knew everything with their eyebrows. Their eyebrows that day made steps downward. When the police finally came to my door, it was not with handcuffs. It was with questions at one hands. Mr. R, the younger one, said, "Do you have a minute?" They asked if I knew the woman in the photo. I didn't. They asked if I had seen anything unusual. I lied in the way that protects you, until it doesn't. They asked if I'd be willing to provide a buccal swab to eliminate you. And the way they said eliminate made the hallway feel like a throat. I said I needed to call someone. They said of course. I went inside and called Maya because my nervous system has old paths. It enjoys walking even when they no longer go anywhere. She didn't pick up. I called Lena. She did. "They're here," I said. "Let them in," she said. "Be helpful. Smile with your teeth. Think clean thoughts." "Why?" "Because the story requires it." She hung up. They took the swab. I watched the cotton disappear into a plastic tube that looked like a calm disaster. The older one told me not to worry. He had a face that had learned to be furniture inside bedrooms. When they left, I sat on my couch and looked at the door in the way a dog looks at a door when it knows the person on the other side is not coming back. For a day or two, I did the things you do when pretending to have a life. I went to work and typed words into boxes that were not hungry for them. I bought food I didn't want because the routine of food is a kind of leash. I slept for hours at the wrong times and woke up with the shape of my body carved into the couch. I didn't go to the bar. I didn't knock on Lena's door. I listened to the building relearn its noise. This is the part where I should tell you why I didn't run. I didn't run because I didn't think it was about me. I didn't run because running would make a story, and I had been escaping stories my whole life by refusing to have a shape. I didn't run because something in me wanted to see how exactly the knife was going to fall. It fell on a Monday. Late afternoon light was in that mood where it turns a hallway into a photograph of itself. I heard voices in the stairwell, and then the wet slam of a body's weight on tile. I opened my door because curiosity and duty looked the same from the inside. Down the stairs, there was a smear where a shape had been dragged. A woman's shoe lay on its side with the exhausted dignity of an object after it's done its job. The smell of chlorine announced itself like a guest you can't turn away. Lena's door was ajar. The apartment beyond was wrong in small ways. The cactus had been broken and reset with tape. The towels were folded into new animals. There was a line of mint candies along the kitchen counter, like breadcrumbs left by a person without a destination. The bathroom door was closed, and under it the light made a desirous line. "Lena," I called. "Are you okay?" "Come in," she said, which is what she always said. I opened the door and found a mirror that didn't need glass. She lay in the tub like it had grown around her. The water was clear and angry smelling. Her hair floated like ideas. Her arms were a ruin of red. The way the cuts ran told me a story I didn't want. Deliberate, practiced, a kind of calligraphy. I made the mistake every story wants you to make and step forward. On the sink, laid out with the kind of love a thief gives a secret. With the artifacts of me, a toothbrush, a razor, a comb with my hair still in it, a glass with a rim that knew my mouth, a napkin from the bar with my lips print, my DNA collected like stamps. "Don't," I said and meant for time. "You took too long," she whispered. Her voice had the high, thin quality of distance. "It needed to be today." "Why?" "Because I vanish better on Mondays," she said, and coughed a laugh that came with bubbles. "And because you finally noticed." I reached for the towel. "Get up." She shook her head in the calm, stubborn way of someone who will not be made. "Don't ruin it," she said. "It has to look like you were here, frantic. It has to look like you love me. It has to look like you did it, and then tried not to have done it." I stared at her, and the room tilted until the world was a trapdoor. You want them to think. "I want the story to end correctly," she said. "A woman is dead because a man thought he was the absence of choices. The city is a stomach with teeth. The police will do math with samples. The mouth of the bottle will lead to you. The math will say we match. They'll call it science. You'll call it corruption. Your ex will call it closure. The husband will bring her water, and she'll drink it like a tarnish. And the kid," she blinked, a slow, underwater blink, "the kid will do what kids do when they believe what they've been shown." "What kid?" I asked, and then I heard it, the tapping, not from the bathroom, but from behind the closet door, beside me. A slow, patient knock at a height that made my stomach drop. I opened the closet because I hadn't know which story I was in. Inside, on a chair with a coat folded like a parent, sat a boy of maybe 12. Brown hair, that could have been mine if mine remembered how to be that age. Eyes that had learned too much patience. He looked at me and then at Lena, and then at me again, as if you could tell who someone is by checking twice. "I told you not now," Lena said to him, gently. He didn't move. His hands were in his lap, folded into apology. He had a thin red line on his wrist, as if he'd practiced. I didn't know Lena had a child. I didn't know if he was hers. I didn't know if he was ours. I didn't know anything except that the room had become a crime I hadn't been trained for. "What are you doing?" I asked him, which is a stupid question for a child sitting in a closet. Waiting, he said. For what? For you, he said, and in his voice I heard my own shape, even the parts when I refused to keep. DNA isn't blood. It's a plot. She said you'd come. Lena watched us like a director about to yell cut. He likes you, she said, and there was real warmth in it, which made me want to set fire to the ideal warmth. I wrapped one of the towels around her arm, and she hissed like the towel had insulted her. Don't be an idiot, she said. It's already written. It's not, I said, and my voice cracked in a way that betrayed how much I wanted it not to be. You can stop. She looked at the boy with a tenderness that made my teeth ache. He needs a reason, she said quietly. He needs a scene to act out when it's time to reenact. This is the cleanest reason I could give him. The boy looked down at his hands. He wasn't crying. He had the dry-eyed stare of someone who has practiced not needing. I took a step toward him, and he flinched so little you could call it a trick of light. What's your name? I asked. He shook his head. Doesn't matter. Lena smiled in that sideways way, and blood made its argument with the white towel. He won't use the one I gave him, she said. He doesn't believe in gifts. Sirens arrive before they arrive. You hear them in your bones first. The building shifted, listening. The piano on 5 held a note and stopped. The dryer on 2 forgot its prayer. I heard feet in the hall. I heard the super say something too fast for words. I heard our story catching up. Please, I said to Lena, and meant everything and nothing. She reached up and touched my cheek with a hand that wasn't ruined. Her fingers were cold and kind. You can be anything, she said, and smiled in a way that made me understand how she had survived this long. You chose to be fog. Fog is a thing that lets other things happen in it. That's your crime. I don't remember everything about the next minutes. I remember pulling the plug because water felt like a cliff. I remember the boy moving without moving, slipping out of the closet, and past me with the grace of someone invisible. I remember Lena's eyes on him like a benediction, and on me like the opposite. I remember the door opening on policemen, and the hallway widening into accusation. The rest unspooled at angles. They took my hands and smiled and told me to breathe as if breath hadn't been what brought me here. They asked questions with their bodies and with their mouths. I answered with a mouth that didn't feel like mine. The towel in my hands made an object lesson out of being caught red-handed. The evidence laid itself out like a confession. We'll sort it, the older one said, and I could tell he meant in the way you mean sorting socks. The building watched and took notes. They found the boy later, not in the closet, not in the hallway, on the roof, sitting close to the edge as if listening. The supers had a key and a prayer. The police had a loud voice and a quiet one. I had nothing anyone needed. When they reached him, he stood up with the careful deliberation of a person measuring what is owed. He looked down at the street and then at us, and then at the far buildings with their windows like eyes. He didn't jump to make a point. He jumped because the story had been loaded and the mechanism released. And even good men with late-night DNA and better intentions couldn't catch him. After, it was all brightness and forms. They took my statement in a room that smelled like coffee futures. They swabbed my mouth again because some beast must be fed. They told me not to go anywhere, and I nodded like I had places to be. I called Maya because even a person you left will sometimes be the person you meant to call when your life falls apart. She came because she is not a villain. She sat in a plastic chair and didn't touch me. Elliot stood behind her with his hand on her shoulder and his set jaw and his enormous kindness, like a piece of furniture that couldn't be moved. "They'll think it's you," she said, in the voice of a scientist who loves her microscope more than her subject. "I know. You shouldn't have gone in," she said. "I know. You should have called." "I know," I said, and realized I'd been saying I know my whole life as a way to stop other people from entering. The detective came back with a face like a diet. "The lab is fast when it wants to be," he said. "The blood in the tub is a mess. Too much chlorine, too much mixing. But the samples around the apartment, the items in the bathroom, they're yours. They're mine because they're mine," I said, and laughed in a way that hurts a throat. He nodded like we were partners in a comedy. The blood under the fingernails of the prior victim was a partial, he said. But now with yours, the database is confident. The word is match. You understand what that means? It means story, I said. It means you get to close the file. It means we have questions, he said deftly, and sat down. How well did you know Miss C? Better than I met her, I said. Maya took a breath like a monsoon. He didn't do this, she said, as if saying it changed mass. The detective looked at her with a softness that surprised me. I have a kid, he said, as if that meant anything, and maybe it does. When my wife and I fight, he folds napkins into shapes. Swans, usually. He makes them fly across the table. It's how he decides which parent is the river. He turned back to me. You want a lawyer? I want a time machine, I said. You can have the lawyer, he said, and handed me a card like a napkin. The days since are a string of things tied together by a hand not mine. They didn't charge me that first week, which is a kind of cruelty. They let me go home to an apartment that has been cleaned the way a room is cleaned when you have to erase not just dirt, but the concept of dirt. The hallway still smells like lemons and chlorine, and the ozone that comes when you scrub the pass with a wire brush. The supers keep their eyebrows to themselves. The boys' chair is gone from the closet, but there is a square of carpet there that looks like a question. The piano on 5 returned to scales with persistence that embarrassed me. The thing about family DNA is that it's not a thread you voluntarily pull. It's the seam that gives when someone else decides you're a sweater. The clinic sent me a letter written by a lawyer who loves numbers more than nouns. Apologies for the lack of clarity in donor usage policies. Apologies for resultant alignment of identities. Apologies for the difficulty you may be experiencing. No money. No explanation. That doesn't require a second explanation. I have a lawyer. He is a man who doesn't flinch when you say blood. He says the case is more theater than substance. He says chlorine complicates everything. He says police math can be argued with if you bring your own numbers. He says the dead boy complicates everything in the opposite direction. Juries are sentimental, he says. They will want a shape they can recognize. I've been asked to stay offline. Of course I'm not. I read everything. I read the comments under articles and the comments under those comments where people do their own math. I read a thread where someone with a username that sounds like a thread explains how genealogical databases are maps, and maps mean there's a destination, whether you like it or not. I read the way the word match is used like destiny. I read the way people want to believe stories end where they're convenient to end. Lena's obituary is a paragraph that chooses its words like a bomb squad. It calls her a beloved daughter and an avid swimmer, and a person who smile lit rooms, which is true if you've ever seen a fire. It does not say mother. It does not say anything about me. Maya sent it to me with no note. I stared at the word beloved until it stopped being a word. The boy's obituary is shorter. It doesn't say his name. It says a youth beloved by his community, which means, in this case, a building where people listen at doors. It says donations can be made to a foundation whose name is designed to make you feel like you can change a future without having to forgive a past. I tried to make a donation and then close the tab before entering my card. It felt like trying to wash a bloodstain out with more blood. You want the worst part? It isn't the police. It isn't the DNA. It isn't even the way the hall still sounds like someone knocking softly to be let out. The worst part is that I keep having the thought, uninvited and unforgivable, that she was right about me, that I chose fog, that I allowed a story to pick me up and place me where it needed me to be, because it's easier to be used than to be something. I can't tell if that thought is an infection or a cure. I ran into Maya and Elliot again last night, because proximity is a habit. She looked at me like a scientist, looking at the wrong sample. They'll make their case, she said, not unkindly. We'll make ours. I asked. She sighed, and for a moment looked tired and away. You only look when you stop for a second on a staircase and admit how far up you are. You were a part of my life, she said. That makes me part of yours whether or not a judge agrees. Elliot shook my hand. His grip was the same. It made me feel like a piece of wood that might be useful later. I'm sorry about the kid, he said, and his voice had a break in it. And I realized he had been a boy once too. I don't know how this ends. which I suppose is honest. Maybe it ends with a court date and a judge, and a word that sounds like a verdict and tastes like metal. Maybe it ends with me leaving the city with a new name and an old face. Maybe it ends with another knock under another door and me deciding to open it. Maybe it ends with me learning the piano scales from the boy upstairs, even if he doesn't know he's teaching. Here are the parts one can say without lying. The hallway still smells like lemons and chlorine. And a third thing I can't identify. The supers keep their keys on finger hooks and never look like they sleep. The cactus grew a crooked new arm where it was taped. The towel I use is gone and I dream about it. The bar pours whiskey that knows my mouth. I keep my toothbrush in a drawer and count its bristles. Sometimes at 3 a.m, I wake to the tapping again. It's faint now like memory. I lay there and listen to each knock like it might be the last. I don't knock back. I don't open the door. I don't call anyone. I stay very still and tell myself I can be something if I remain a shape long enough. I recite this like a prayer against a religion I no longer understand. The other night, I heard a new sound after the tapping. A child's footsteps, hesitant and then sure. I sat up and went to the door and pressed my forehead against it. On the other side, something paused and then moved away. I waited until the building resumed its list of acceptable noises. This is the closest thing to a moral I have. There's a line on the bulletin board now, written in thick marker under the finger keys, and the cat poster, and the notice about paint chips. If you see something, say something. Beneath it, in smaller letters, someone has added, if you feel something, do something. Beneath that, in a different hand, if you are something, be something. I'm trying. I'm writing this because there's a chance that's what being something looks like for me. I'm writing this because somewhere in a drawer there's a bag with my hair in it, and somewhere in a database there's my mouth, and somewhere on a roof the wind is still measuring the shape of a boy who made a choice because a woman loved him in a way that sharpened the world. They will say, if it comes to that the science is sure. They will say matches don't lie. They will use words like inevitable and pattern and profile, and match again and again until the word stops asking permission and becomes a law. They won't mention chlorine or lemons or mints on a counter, or towels folded into animals, or a cactus that learned to grow around its wound. I have a different word I keep in my pocket like a talisman. Mirror. It is a word that does nothing by itself. It needs someone to stand in front of it. It needs a face. It needs a choice. Tonight, I'm going to the bar. I'm going to sit where I can see the mirror and not my face but the room behind it. The door, the hall, the stairs, the place where a shoe waited, the hooks shaped like fingers, the board with its ugly honesty. I'm going to order water because I don't trust anything that burns. If Maya and Elliot walk in, I'll nod and not wait to be forgiven. If the detective walks in, I'll nod and not wait to be condemned. If the boy walks in, if he does, if he can, I'll stand up and ask him what song he wants to hear, and then I'll learn it even if my hands shake. When the tapping comes, I'll open the door. I'm saying to hear, so I can't pretend I didn't mean it. I'll open and I won't say, come in, and I won't say, go away. I'll ask what is needed, and I will try not to be fogged. If you're reading this because you live within walls and you tell yourself that's a kind of safety, consider this your sign. Remove the mint from the trash. Throw out the chlorine. Know that science is a vocabulary for truth, and also for hiding what truth makes us do. Know that matches can be masks. Know that sometimes a woman can be a door and a knife and a mirror and a mother all at once, and that none of those things excuse the others. Know that sometimes children take our scripts and recite them to the last line. Know that a hallway is a mouth. I don't know how long I can stay here. The building learned my steps, and now I hear myself when anyone walks. The cactus is thriving in a way that feels like a rebuke. The piano on 5 is moving to pieces with names. The dryer on 2 is faithful. The super's eyebrows tell a story I'm not fluent in. The bar glasses keep their shine. The DNA sites send me emails about new cousins as if the solution to a problem of blood is more blood. If anyone asks me what I saw, I will tell the truth, such as it is. I saw a person who decided the shape of her life with knives, and a person who tried not to decide the shape of his at all, and a child who believed both and stepped into the only space left. I saw a city that treats stories like currency and blood like a ledger. I saw a hallway that learned a new smell and couldn't unlearn it. There's a knock at the door now, not the tapping. A full, crisp daylight knock. I'm going to answer it. I'm going to be something. If it's the police, I'll give them my mouth again and let them think they own it. If it's Maya, I'll let her science me and try to remember that observation without contamination is a lie. If it's a neighbor with a complaint about the lemons, I'll buy them limes. If it's a boy with dry eyes, I'll say his name even if he doesn't. If it's you, and you live in a building like mine, and you think thin walls mean someone will hear you if you knock, consider this me knocking back. Story 7. I found out my husband is a serial killer. If you've ever loved someone, really loved them, you'll understand why I didn't see it sooner. Love isn't blind, it's selective. It chooses what to look at. And I didn't want to see the cracks. I met Aaron in my last year of college. He wasn't my type at first. Too tall, too quiet, too still. But he had this way of listening to me that made me feel like I was the only person in the room. We got married 3 years later. For the first 5 years, we were the cliche perfect couple. Vacations, dinner parties, inside jokes. He never raised his voice, never lost his temper. If I had to describe him in one word, it would have been safe. But then little things started to bother me. It began with the basement. Aaron didn't let me down there, not in a don't touch my tools way, more in a the door's always locked way. He said it was because the steps were steep and I was clumsy. And I believe him, for a while. Then there was the laundry. Once a week, he'd wash his clothes alone. Not with mine, not even in the same load as his other clothes. Just one set, jeans, a long sleeve shirt, and an old hoodie. Always dark colors. Always late at night. I'd wake up at 2 a.m. to the sound of the dryer, but he'd never let me help fold them. Said it was just work clothes. The first rail crack appeared one night in January. Aaron was late coming home. Really late. I stayed up waiting, pacing the living room, imagining car accidents or ER visits. When he finally came in at almost 3 a.m., his hands were shaking. His hoodie was damp, and there was a smear of something dark on his cuff. Paint, he told me. But I knew he was lying. 2 weeks later, the news broke. A young woman had been found in a drainage ditch on the edge of town. Beaten, strangled. The police didn't have a suspect. The photo they showed on TV was haunting. Not because I knew her, but because I recognized the ditch. It was less than a mile from where Aaron worked. I tried to ignore the thought. I really did. But the coincidences kept piling up. He'd come home late. The news would have another report of a missing woman. And every single one had last been seen near the industrial park where Aaron's office was. I started noticing his work clothes more, the way they smelled metallic like pennies and bleach, the way he kept them separate, the way he never threw them out, no matter how worn they got. The night it all clicked. I wasn't even looking for proof. I was looking for wrapping paper in the closet when I found the shoebox. It was tucked behind old coats, wrapped in a garbage bag. Inside were photographs, dozens of them, all women, some smiling in daylight, some taken at night, their faces lit by a camera flash. Some were asleep, some were clearly dead. I dropped the box. It was like my body refused to hold it. When Aaron came home, I tried to act normal. I couldn't. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. He noticed. Of course he noticed. "What's wrong?" he asked. I opened my mouth to lie, but then I saw it. A single hair stuck to his sleeve. Long blonde. I'm brunette. I didn't sleep that night. I didn't move. I just lay there, listening to him breathe next to me, wondering how many women had fallen asleep beside him and never woken up. The next morning, I called the police from my car. I told them everything. The clothes, the shoebox, the smell. They told me to leave the house and wait. That was 2 weeks ago. They arrested him quietly in our driveway. I watched from a neighbor's window as they pulled him out in handcuffs. He didn't fight. He didn't even look surprised. They found 6 bodies. They think there are more. I'm giving this statement now because I don't know how else to get out of me. Because I keep replaying every dinner, every kiss, every night curled up against him, and wondering how many times I almost became number 7. If you're reading this, and you think you know the person you're with, check again. Some monsters don't growl. They smile and ask about your day and hold your hand while they wash the blood out of their clothes. Story 8. I work night shift at a hospital. The closed wing keeps paging me. They tell you the night shift has a different gravity. The lights are lower, the halls feel longer, and sound travels in ways it doesn't during the day. You learn the language of machines, the sigh of a ventilator, the soft cough of an N4 pump, the staccato alarm that means someone's heart just decided it's had enough. You also learn which noises to ignore. Hospitals make 1,000 harmless sounds in the dark, but there's one sound I was taught to ignore the first week. The overhead page to Wing C. Wing C is closed. If you walk the main corridor past the double fire doors, you'll hit a lit sign that still reads C Wing, but the doors themselves are chained from the inside with a thick brass padlock. Behind them is a dead hallway, a stretch of tile that used to lead to oncology. 5 years ago there was a fire. No one died, but the whole unit was gutted with smoke and water damage. Administration decided it was cheaper to expand elsewhere than to renovate. Maintenance sealed it. Lights cut, vents capped, off the map. And yet, sometimes around 2 or 3 in the morning, the overhead speakers will crackle and a female voice will say, "Dr. Rahman to Wing C. Dr. Rahman, please report to Wing C." The veterans told me it was a glitch in the old paging system that nobody wanted to pay to fix. If you hear it, you didn't, my preceptor said, only half joking. Keep your head down and keep charting. I didn't think about it much my first month. Nights are fog of meds, vitals, empty coffee cups. But 3 weeks ago, on a Tuesday that felt like a Thursday and tasted like stale gum, I was covering observation beds when the speakers popped. Dr. Rahman to Wing C. 2 seconds later, it repeated a little louder. "Dr. Rahman, please report to Wing C." I looked up at the ceiling tile, then at the clock. 3:12 a.m. Old system burping. Said Hadi, the tech at the station. He didn't even glance up from the monitor. Ignore it. We went back to charting. At 3:17, 5 minutes later, the page chimed again. Dr. Rahman, Wing C. Now the voice sounded wrong. Warmer than the usual automated page. Like a person leaning toward a mic. Hadi's fingers froze on the keyboard for a heartbeat, then resumed. He pretended not to hear. I wish I could say I did the same. The 3rd time it came, something in me tightened, not a big thing, just a knot under the ribs. I told myself I was curious, or maybe I wanted to walk to wake up. I told myself a lot of things as I stood and grabbed the master keys from the hook. I'm going to grab blankets from supply. I told Hadi. "Cool," he said, still not looking. I didn't go to supply. The corridor to Wing C isn't far from observation. The hospital was built in phases, and you can feel the seams where one decade attaches to another. The floor tiles shift color. The walls jump from modern antiseptic gray to older plaster, painted a shade they probably once called soothing sage, and now looks like the undertone of a bruise. The C-wing doors look like they always do. Chain and padlock a tag that read "Do not remove." Beyond them, only dark. I don't know what I expected. Voices, movement, something to make me laugh at myself and turn around. Instead, I got the smell. Hospitals have a smell. Even scrub clean, they keep a base note of disinfectant and human breath, with hints of coffee and sadness. The air near the sea doors was wrong. It was colder, and underneath the cold was a whisper of burned plastic. If you've ever left a cheap kettle on too long and caught it just before it died, you know the smell. Hot, faintly sweet, a little poisonous. I stood there a full minute listening. Nothing. Then I noticed the chain wasn't actually threaded through both handles. It was looped through the left handle and around a bar welded to the right. If you lifted the left handle hard enough, The chain would slacken just enough to slip an arm through. I didn't decide to try. My hand just moved. The handle was stiff, colder than the metal should have been. It squeaked when I pulled. The chain bowed. I slipped my arm through, awkwardly, and found the interior bar. It took 3 tries to catch it with my fingers and lift. The doors gave a little, enough to let me lean my shoulder in and slide. I know what you're thinking. Stupid. I've thought it too, 100 times since. But at the time it felt inevitable, like the voluntary part of me had stepped aside to let something older do the walking. Inside, the dark had wait. I clicked on my pen light. The beam picked out dust like snow in a tunnel of air. The hallway past the doors felt abandoned in a way that clean spaces never can. There were outlines on the wall where signs used to be, squares a few shades lighter than the surrounding paint. A rolling chair with one wheel missing lay tipped on its side. The split plastic of the broken caster sharp as a snapped tooth. I told myself I'd go 20 steps and turn back. I took 21, then 22, then lost count. Dr. Rahman to Wing C. The page came again, but it sounded different in there, like it wasn't coming from above me, but from ahead. The pen light shook in my hand. I kept walking. I passed the old nurse station. Someone had draped a dusty sheet over the counter, and the sheet had settled around equipment like a frozen wave. I lifted a corner. Underneath was an intercom module with big square buttons, the kind you'd see in a school hallway 30 years ago. The PA switch had a crack across it, a lightning fork through faded plastic. The page came again. This time the speaker wasn't the ceiling. It was the intercom box. The tiny grill hissed, and that same woman's voice, not automated human, came through, soft as brushing your cheek. Dr. Rahman, please. For a second, I wasn't on night shift in an empty wing. I was 8 years old, and my mother was calling my father's name from the kitchen, tired and trying not to sound it. The feeling hit hard and vanished. I backed away from the counter and nearly tripped over the corner of the sheet. The patient rooms in Wing C were square and small. My light found the numbers above the doors. C 301, C 302, C 303. The third had scorch marks around the frame that weren't there on the others. Little fingers of soot reaching out across the paint. My throat tightened. Stupid. I moved on. At C 307 I stopped. The door was shut like the rest, but the call light above the frame, the flat plastic rectangle that glows when a patient hits their button, was on. It pulsed slowly, sickly yellow, the color of old teeth. I stood there very still. Another hospital. Another year. Someone might have wired the system to test. But this wing wasn't wired to anything. The power feeds were cut. If you shoved a plug into an outlet in here, it would give you only silence. The light pulsed once, twice. I put my ear to the door. The wood was cool. I heard nothing from inside except my own breath. And beyond that, the building's heartbeat. Vents that weren't supposed to be running. Something settling overhead. Pipes you swear you can hear thinking. The handle turned when I tried it. The hinges creaked. The smell got thicker. Burned plastic and something else. A medicinal sweetness like old cough syrup. The room was empty. No bed, no chair. The window was blacked out with plywood. The edges caulked. On the far wall, someone had drawn a square with a carpenter's pencil. For precise lines, like they intended to cut into the drywall and then change their mind. On the floor sat a call bell unit. The plastic casing yellowed with age. The cord snaked out under the door, up to the light. Someone had hardwired it directly to the indicator. It shouldn't have been on. I crouched. The unit wasn't connected to power in any way I could see. The cord ran into the wall and ended. Still, the light above me pulsed like a slow breath. I thumbed to cancel on the bell. Nothing. Dr. Rahman to Wing C. The voice came from behind me this time, in the hall, as if whoever was paging had stepped into the corridor and was calling to me by my wrong name, asking me to be someone else. I left the room. I told myself I'd seen enough. Curiosity satisfied. At the nurse station, the intercom's little red transmit LED was lit. My hand hovered over the button marked reset. I pressed it. The light went out. The intercom went quiet. My pen light framed a small label under the unit, written in old adhesive tape, the kind that turned brown at the edges. R. Ramon. I don't know why that felt like a punch. People leave labels. It means nothing. I turned away. That's when I heard the footsteps. They weren't the heavy thump of boots or the clack of heels. They were the flat, damp sound of bare feet, quick and close. They ran across tiles somewhat to my right, then stopped. I spun the light. It found only dust and an overturned laundry cart. Something brushed my shoulder. Not air, not imagination. It had direction and weight, the way a child's hand is weight when it patters past your sleeve. I swung the light and saw a smear on the fabric of my scrub top, a brownish print the size of a small palm, as if someone had pressed their hand there and left a whisper of iodine. I walked out. I didn't run. My brain instructed my legs. Walk, do not run, because running makes it real and your back is too open. I walked the same number of steps out that I had taken in, or tried to. I reached the chain doors and shouldered through the gap, bumping the metal hard enough to bruise a rib. Back in the lit corridor, the hospital's normal smell hit like a wave of sanity. The burned plastic sweetness was gone. The overhead speakers were quiet. The clock read 3:36. At the station, Hadi glanced up. "Blankets?" he asked. "Didn't have any," I said. My voice was too thin. I cleared my throat. "I'll grab from third." He nodded and went back to the screen. I sat down with my charting and watched my hands not shake. I told myself I'd dream half of it. Lack of sleep puts cracks in you where weird things leak in. But the smear on my scrub top didn't dream. I tossed the shirt at home and tried not to think about it. The next 2 nights were uneventful. I let myself believe the old guys, PA system glitch, nerves, nothing more. Then Friday came. It was busy. We had a double admission at 1 a.m., then a combative withdrawal at 2:20. By the time I sat to breathe, it was 3:05. I took one sip of coffee that tasted like cigarette filters, and then the speaker cracked. Dr. Ramon to Wing C. The hair rose on my arms. I kept typing. Hadi didn't look up. The second page came and then the third, space and fives like someone watching the clock. I held the keys for 20 minutes and didn't stand. And then Patient Deeb in OBS 6 hit, his call bell with the insistence of a toddler with a new toy. He wanted to tell me the TV remote wasn't responding to channel up, only channel down. I replaced the batteries and told him to sleep. When I stepped back into the hallway, a second call light was glowing at the far end, in the direction of C-Wing. Not the sealed doors, the light above the small service door across from them, that led to a linen closet. The indicator above it pulsed the same old teeth yellow as the one I'd seen in C. 307. The service door wasn't supposed to have a call light. It wasn't even on the same system. I stood there, coffee clawing its way up my throat, and watched it blink. I don't remember unlocking that door. I remember the closet smell, warm dust, the starch of folded sheets. There was a hatch in the back wall I'd never noticed, a rectangle cut into the drywall and screwed back in place. The screws looked fresh compared to the rest of the wall. Someone had put a strip of duct tape across one corner. On the tape, a word in black marker. Spare. I peeled the tape back and put my ear to the panel. From the other side came the faintest sound, like a radio in another room tuned between stations. Not talk, not music. The idea of voices. I closed the door carefully and locked it. The light above it went out. When I turned back toward the station, Hadi was watching me. His face had that carefully blank expression nurses use when someone's doing something they shouldn't and you don't want to write it down later. "You hearing it?" he asked. "What?" "The page." I nodded. He let out a breath through his nose. Used to be before the fire. Dr. Ramon was oncology night. He was good. He'd sit with people who were dying like he had nowhere else to be. After the fire, the first month we came back, the page would call him every night. Then less. Then just on some weeks. I don't know why it started up again. What happened to him? I asked. Hadi looked at the ceiling in a way that meant he truly didn't know. Transferred? Retired? Everyone old enough to remember is either days or gone. The rest of that shift felt like the kind of dream where you keep trying to pack a bag, but your hands won't pick up anything you need. I finished my charting by force and drove home as the sky went colorless behind the buildings. 2 nights later, I was off. I woke at 3:17 exactly, hard like a fish in my chest. The room smelled faintly like burned plastic. I got up, turned on all the lights, and told myself I was being dramatic. On my next stretch, the page came at 3:12, 3:17, 3:22. It was almost funny in its punctuality. I didn't go to Wing C. I cleaned 4 poles like a man scrubbing guilt. I let Hottie feel the noise with his practiced ignoring. Then Mr. Deeb coded at 3:29. Real alarm screamed. Real feet ran. We worked him for 6 minutes and bought him a heartbeat, a ragged, fragile thing, but held. In the aftermath, as we gathered our chests back into our bodies, the overhead cracked. Dr. Amon to Wing C. Something in me snapped. Maybe it was exhaustion, or the electric aftertaste of adrenaline, or the way the page cut through real life like a knife through the line that divides then from now. I took the keys. I didn't lie to Hottie. I said, "I'm going to see," and he said nothing and looked at his hands. The doors gave the same way they had before. The burn smell met me like a friend I didn't like. I went straight to C, 307. The light above the door was already on, pulsing. Inside, the square on the wall had changed. It wasn't pencil anymore. Someone had cut it. The drywall rectangle leaned against the baseboard. Beyond the hole was a space. 2 studs wide, dusty the inside of a wall. My light sewed its little beam into the cavity and found wires, a dead roach, and at the bottom, a box. It was a small plastic case the size of a paperback, the kind they sell at electronic stores to keep components safe, with a cracked, smoky lid. Inside, a circuit board sat like a fossilized leaf. Printed across the board in ink that had run from heat were 2 words, Ramon Pager. I picked up the box and nearly dropped it. It was warm, hotter than it had any right to be, like it had been sitting in sunlight. I sat on the floor, pried the lid, and saw the board was wired to a battery pack grafted in with electrical tape. Old, improvised, wrong. Someone had built a device, shoved it into the wall, and left it to cook. And the intercom, reset or not, kept obeying it. That's when the monitor woke. Hospitals are full of screens. Even in a dead wing, there are terminals. Most won't boot without power. This one did. Somehow, though the plug drooped out of a socket that wasn't live. The screen flickered and spit a green cursor into a black field like a relic from a forgotten decade. Letters rolled across in a slow type no human could duplicate. Subject, R. Ramon status. Already failed instructions. Erase memory. Start loop. My mouth went dry. I stepped back. My heel hit the corner of the hole, and the drywall scraped my ankle. Something moved in the intercom behind me. A tiny rattle like a bead in a child's toy. "I'm not him," I said out loud, because the room had become a person you had to address. "I'm not." The words felt futile. The monitor didn't care. The cursor blinked twice, and then new text slid in. New subject, and her name. I turned to go. I made it to the hall. I made it 3 steps, 5, 9. Then the overhead speaker in the dead ceiling opened and whispered. Not the woman's voice, but my own. Recorded, slightly tinny, but mine. Dr. Amon to Wing C. I wish this is where I say I ran. I didn't. I stood there, dumb, and let the sound pass through me. It felt like standing in a doorway with a hand on both frames, and realizing you're the door. I went back to the nurse station like I'd been underwater, and finally found air again. Hottie looked up and paled. "You look like hell. There's a device in the wall. Something built. It's paging itself." He shook his head. Admin said they pulled all that after the fire. Admin says a lot. We didn't call anyone. Who would we call? Maintenance would shrug. Security would give us a form. The house supervisor would tell us to focus on patient care. So we did for the rest of the night. No pages came. At 6 a.m., I went back to C. 307 to convince myself I'd overreacted. The hole was still there. The box wasn't. On the way out at the intercom, I saw the old tape label again. R. Ramon. I peeled it back. Underneath, in smaller, faded handwriting, was a second label almost erased by time. R. Ramon Temp. The next day, I spent an hour in the basement records room. The clerk, a woman with glasses that magnified her eyes, let me browse the old staff rosters from the year of the fire. There was no Dr. Ramon in oncology. There was a Ramon R., but not a physician, a night orderly. 6 months on the job. Terminated after the fire. Reason: workplace violation. When I asked what that meant, the clerk shrugged. Could be anything. Taking supplies home. Sleeping on shift. Something worse. We didn't digitize the details from that year. As I left, she called after me. We did have one doctor who used to sit nights with patients. He was a pediatrician who volunteered when he couldn't sleep. Not a Ramon, though, different name. I drove home with a taste of burned plastic in my throat and the feeling that the building had a mouth and I had been talking into it. I wish I could tell you I quit. I pictured writing a tidy email and walking out into a life where nights are for sleeping and walls are just walls. I pictured that and then found myself clocking again at dusk, as if the punch reader had a gravity I couldn't fight. The following shift, the pages started earlier. 2:57, 3:02, 3:07, every 5 minutes like a metronome. I didn't answer. Patients needed meds and encouragement and blankets and human things. I gave those and pretended the other need wasn't there. At 3:21, OBS access monitor blared a false lead-off alarm. I silenced it, checked the wires, taped them down. When I stepped back into the hall, the lights flickered, not a full stutter, just a blink long enough to take one image of the world and steal it. So when the light returned, you had to compare the two and decide what was missing. What was missing was my key ring. It had been clipped to my waistband. Now it wasn't. My left hip felt naked. I checked the floor, my pockets, the station, the bathroom. Nothing. Hottie raised his eyebrows. Sympathy plus we're so screwed. Without master keys, you are a body without hands. We retraced my steps, me with a suspicion taste of a stolen wallet rising. When we reached the hall by Wing C, the keys sat on the floor 3 inches inside the chain doors, as if someone had dropped them on the other side and nudged them into view with a toe. I looked at Hottie. He shook his head once, emphatic. I slid my arm through the gap. The keys were warm. I wish that was the end. It wasn't. You don't get an end with these things. You get a narrowing, a pressure, and if you're lucky, a place where you can stand with your back to something solid and keep breathing. Last night, the page came not at 5-minute intervals, but as a continuous whisper. It didn't say Dr. Ramon anymore. It said my name, not the name on the schedule or the roster. The name my mother used when she wanted me to come home. The one I haven't heard in years except inside my own head. It called it soft, patient, as if it had all the time in the world, as if it could wait, as if it had been waiting since long before me and would keep waiting long after. I took the keys and went to Wing C and stood in front of C 307 and didn't go in. The light above the door pulsed and I let it. I said quietly to the empty hall, I won't remember you. The intercom clicked. The old computer in the nurse station hummed, though no one had touched it. Somewhere in the walls, a battery warmed a circuit board and sent a signal into the dark. I took a marker from my pocket, the kind we use to label tubing, and wrote on the wall outside 307 at the level of my eye. If you see this, do not go IN. Then I went back to the living, to the patients who ask for extra ice, and the ones who need a hand to hold at 4 a.m. when the long thoughts come. When my shift ended and the sun did that pale trick it does at dawn, I walked out past the chain doors, past the sign that says C Wing, past the smell that might be in the air or just in my head. I walked into morning and the ordinary world and said my name out loud to hear from a human tongue. When I came back tonight, the marker writing was gone. Not scrubbed. Gone. Like no one had ever written anything there. The wall looked the way it did the day of the fire. If that makes sense, the paint holding its breath. So I'm writing this down here while I still remember. Because maybe that old screen wasn't talking to me. Maybe it was leaving a note the way you leave a nightlight on for your own return. Maybe the loop isn't a trap, so much as a bargain the building made to keep something behind the walls from coming out. Give me a name, and I will drop a page. Give me a name, and I will keep them busy while the living sleep. Give me a name, and I will erase it at dawn. If you work nights in a hospital, and you hear a page to a wing that doesn't exist anymore, don't answer. If you do answer, don't go past the third door on the left. If you do go past it, and you find a call light pulsing over a room with no bed, and a hole where a square used to be, don't pick up the box. Don't press the intercom button. Don't read the screen. And if you hear a voice on the PA that sounds like your own, remember that buildings learn the language of the people inside them. If you tell them your name enough times, they will learn how to say it back. If I forget this tomorrow, someone reading will remember for me. That's the other trick of nights. The way strangers hold each other's stories up to the weak light like x-rays, seeing what's broken and what's missing and what's trying to heal. I'm going to finish my round now. The page just came again. It didn't call any name this time. It said, softly, like a parent standing at a door that won't open, please. And whatever you do, if you ever hear that, don't answer. Story 9. My family line ends when someone solves the inheritance cube. No one wanted my uncle's gimmick heirloom. It was some puzzle artifact passed down to my mom's side for generations, wrapped in cryptic, superstitious lore. But at the end of the day, it still looked like a plastic toy. Instead of inheriting any property or money like the rest of my family when my uncle passed, I drew the short straw, and I was bequeathed this piece of junk. It looked like a typical Rubik's Cube. For my bright young nephew, keep dazzling us. Your Uncle Ike. It was a really mean-spirited note, too. Like, really mean-spirited. You see, I dropped out of my engineering degree some 20-odd years ago, and have since lived at home with my parents, where I barely worked a day in my life. Everyone makes fun of me for it. And yes, you can judge me all you want, I really don't care. But the fact that my uncle, in his last will and testament, decided to take a fucking jab at my socially stigmatized manboyhood felt like a really, really low blow. And so I decided to get back at him. I visited the cemetery and left a stupid heirloom toy on his grave with my own note. At least I'm not dead, bitch. Your nephew, Wallace. I wasn't going to let my dead uncle call me out as a loser. Just who did he think he was? I spat on his tombstone before I left. When I got home, my mom had already put my pizza pops in my room. I was about to settle in and watch some Twitch when my mouse started acting up. I opened my drawer to grab my wireless one, and that's where I saw it again, the Rubik's Cube. My uncle's joke gift sat in my eerily empty drawer, and right under it, a note. So you want to play? My heart jumped into my skull. I almost choked on a piece of spicy pepperoni. How did this get into my room? An otherworldly coldness seeped out of the cube, but not through any kind of breeze or wind. It was more of a pulsating coldness, a sort of invisible radiation. The chill permeated from the puzzle and spilled around my body and gaming chair. Something inside me could sense the cube was channeling an ethereal awfulness from a far-off place, perhaps an impossible place. I flipped over the printed note. On the reverse side was a riddle. One of the following statements is true. The cube can be solved. The Surfesian will kill you. Best of luck. Your Uncle Ike. I checked the rest of my drawer to see if there was anything else, but there was nothing. My drawer was completely clean. Surfesian? The hell is a Surfesian? The coldness across my back intensified exponentially. Shivers blitzed up to my neck as if my backside was suddenly exposed to a meat freezer. I moved away from the cold and could see icy condensation forming on my headrest. What the fuck? I backed away and could see the faint sparkle of iciness on the chair. Then a pair of invisible arms wrapped around me, like a hug from winter itself. Shoo, quiet Wally. Just lie down. Shoo. It was my mother's voice. She was talking to me with a strange inflection, as if she were speaking some 8-year-old version of myself. S-H-H-H-H. Lie down. Don't worry, Wally. Just lie down. It was as haunting as it was comforting. The whisper spoke right into my left ear, just like my mom used to do it whenever I had my night terrors. And there did come an urge to lie down, a powerful urge to lie down, as if some deep, primal part of me wanted to give in, collapse, and allow all the matter in my body to return to dust. But I snapped out of it. I fled out of my room and found both my parents on the couch. They kept their eyes on the TV. Blue Planet was on. Everything all right, Wall? Mom, were you just in my room? What? Were you just in my room like a second ago? In your room? No. Can you boil some tea? The invisible hands wrapped around my waist again. They were so icy cold they felt like fire. I broke free in a jolt and ran to the foyer. Some orange pico would be nice. My mom called. Those arms were trying to pin me down. Freeze me. What did that note say? That the Surfesian would kill me? I ran back to my room in a panic and grabbed my uncle's stupid toy. The note said only one of the statements could be true. So, did that mean if I solved the Rubik's Cube, the Surfesian couldn't kill me? A footprint made of frost appeared at my door. Another one formed closer. They were human-shaped footprints, except they had no toes. Your father also wants some tea. My mom called. Maybe boil a big pot? I circumnavigated the invisible ice thing and tried to think of the hottest place I could go in a house. Without hesitation, I scampered to the kitchen. I set the broil temperature at 600 degrees and left the oven door open. Maybe I could prevent the thing from coming in here if I make it too hot. I put the kettle on too. A few seconds later, I could see its hoary footprints follow me across the kitchen tiles. I slinked away and started looping around the house to avoid getting fatally ice-hugged. The Surfesian might have been getting colder and perhaps stronger, but it certainly wasn't fast enough to catch me. Is this some new cardio routine? My mom asked, still watching TV. No, Mom. It's Uncle's puzzle. I'm running for my life from a Surfesian. There's an Asian in the house? After a few minutes, I returned to the kitchen and felt the sweltering heat. The area beside the oven was sauna hot. I waited to see if that thing would dare follow me. I saw its frosty, toeless feet appear on the kitchen tiles, but they melted immediately. Then the creature's footprints reappeared by the door. It wasn't coming in. Good. So long as I stand by this blistering oven, this thing will leave me alone. I grabbed my phone and found a YouTube video of some tween showing off how to solve a Rubik's Cube in 10 minutes. It was demeaning. My chonky adult hands couldn't make half the moves as dexterous little Swedish fingers could. But I had to try. After spending 5 minutes learning how to make a white cross on my bequeathed cube's bottom, I then spent another 5 struggling with any progress on the second step. Did you put the tea on, Wally? The oven was sweltering. My hands were dripping from sweat. I could barely twist the cube properly, and I kept having to restart because this fucking Swedish kid's tutorial was going way too quickly. Wall, don't forget there's that trick to get the oven element to. Not now, Mom. I'm trying to solve Uncle's stupid fucking thing. Leave me alone. Then I saw the feet approach closer. The ground they stood on looked like it was cracking, as if the level of cold was condensing the atoms into new impossible positions. It may have been the coldest temperature ever achieved on Earth. Fuck me. If that thing even grazed me, I'd probably die in an instant from hypothermia. And yet, I was still sweating my balls off by this oven. The heat was even starting to peel the stickers off of the Rubik's Cube. Wait a minute. I circled around the Surfesian and ran out of the kitchen. My fingers aggressively started peeling all the stickers off the cube. The colored little squares stuck to my palms. Why are you running through the house? My mom yelled. And where's the tea? Like a kindergartner in art class, I struggled to move the peeled squares onto each correct cube face. The sweat was making the stickers slide. Behind me, I could see the footprints shrivel the wooden floorboards and rob them of all color. Anything the Surfesian touched turned into frozen black dust. And put milk in mine, my dad said. I stumbled into my room again and quickly put all the correct stickers on all the remaining sides. A single white square fell off the cube and twirled downward like a flower petal. I snagged the sticker, but before I could reapply it, I heard that familiar whisper in my left ear. It's okay. Without resistance, my body curled up into a fetal position. The world around me faded into cold, unseeable darkness. There you go. Just relax, Wally. It was terrifying, mortifying, but at the same time, ineffably relaxing, like the words were made of liquid morphine. Just close your eyes and everything will be okay. This is the end of the line. Icy weight fell upon me from all sides. Cascades of black sand held my fetal position in place. I was being compressed between layers and layers of permafrost I couldn't see. I was being crystallized, fossilized. Hush now. Just lie down. My neck had frozen. My shoulders had frozen. SHHHH, SHHHHH. My feet had frozen. My legs had frozen. Wally, the kettle's boiling. Are you deaf? My fingers still held the cube. My chonky thumb still held the last sticker. For God's sakes, Wall, we can't even hear David Attenborough. It was like fighting off a cloud of anesthesia. Everything was blurred. Everything was cold and paralyzed in place. I twitched my frostbitten fingers and pushed the last sticker and cube together, praying that maybe, just maybe they could align. And somehow they did. In a whoosh of air, my room-stale pizza pop smell returned to my nostrils. I woke up shivering on my shag rug. The black sand, the coldness, the wraith-like voice, they all vanished. The kettle was boiling. Am I going to have to get myself? My mom yelled from the living room. I got up and stumbled over to the kitchen. I finally took the kettle off the element and poured 2 cups of orange pico for my parents, spoonful of sugar for my mom, dollop of milk for my dad. I walked past all the black, frostbitten segments of our flooring and delivered the tea to my folks on a little tray. Took you long enough, my mom said, looking quite fed up. What's gotten into you today? I stood there, staring at my 70-something parents, who were essentially sags of flesh that moved between their bedroom and the couch. Mom, I literally just fought off an ice demon from another dimension that's somehow tied to your family's stupid legacy cube, which, by the way, nobody wanted because it's cursed garbage, and it spent the better part of the last half hour trying to turn me into some kind of frozen ice trophy. So forgive me if I'm not in the mood for a lecture on tea-making etiquette right now. Give me a fucking break. Don't confuse life with your video games, Wall, whatever. I walked back into my room and slammed the door. I was still tense, shivering, and even sniveling from my exposure to the Arctic death world. But I was alive. I sighed. If it wasn't my ungrateful parents giving me crap, it was my asshole uncle sending fucking Ephesians to teach me a life lesson or some shit. Fuck's sakes. I opened the drawer to see if my wireless mouse was back. Instead, I saw a newly shuffled Rubik's Cube and another note. Well done, nephew. Consider me dazzled. Do you have what it takes to continue? I turned the note over. One of the following statements is true. The cube can be solved. You will live a life of wasteful mediocrity. Make the right choice. Your Uncle Ike. I closed the drawer. I looked through a tangle of cables I kept in a box of old stuff above my wardrobe and found a regular wired mouse. I plugged it into my computer. It seemed to work fine. I taped the drawer with the cube shut with no plans to open it again. Then I reheated my pizza pops. They tasted fantastic.